Across our Masco family of companies, our goal is to deliver better living possibilities and make positive changes in the neighborhoods where we live, work, and do business. Masco, a Michigan company since 1929. Support also provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit PBS.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit PBS. Through our giving, we are committed to meeting the needs of the communities we serve statewide to help ensure a bright and thriving future for all. Learn more at dtefoundation.com.
Nissan Foundation, and viewers like you.
Good afternoon and welcome to Detroit PBS's live coverage of the 2026 Mackinac Policy Conference from the historic Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island. I'm Zoe Clark, Political Director at Michigan Public. Over the next few days, we'll be following the conversation shaping Michigan's future as leaders from business, government, philanthropy, and communities across the state gather under this year's theme, A Quest for Common Ground. With the midterm elections ahead and big questions on the table about Michigan's economy, workforce, infrastructure, and opportunity, this conference offers a unique chance to talk about practical solutions to move the state forward. We're kicking things off today with a session titled Workforce of Tomorrow.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the conversation focused on a topic of great importance to all of us who live and work in Michigan. How can we best align our shared educational, business, and regional assets to support the development of tomorrow's workforce? Hello, my name is Brianna Scott, and I am the chair of the Michigan State University Board of Trustees, and I'm very pleased. Well, thank you. I am very pleased to be here to introduce today's topic. I want to thank each of our panelists and our moderator, who will be introduced to you shortly, and the Detroit Regional Chamber, and all of those who have contributed to planning and producing this year's Mackinac Policy Conference. This is a great topic to help kick off this year's conference, given the challenges that are in front of us, given the challenges that Michigan is currently facing, and the very direct relationships between educational attainment and personal and community prosperity. I am more than a little biased on this point. I wouldn't have committed to serving Michigan State University and the state of Michigan if I didn't believe in the value of higher education. But you don't have to take my word for it. We only need to look at the Detroit Regional Chamber's 2025 State of Education and Talent Report. This report opened by noting that Michigan ranks 40th in per capita income, its lowest recording ranking. And its number one finding is, and I quote, degree attainment is the pathway to regional and individual economic prosperity. There is no such thing as highly prosperous region that is not also highly educated. And I'm not saying our kids all need to earn college degrees, but I am sure that we can each agree that some post-secondary education and credential is necessary for most of today's careers. And that too is highlighted by the Chamber's report. It called for the culture shift and the policies to support it toward at least a K-12 plus 2 mindset to allow Michigan kids a pathway towards the American dream. You cannot expect to pull yourself up without bootstraps to begin with, but here is good news. Here in Michigan, we have assets that most places can only dream of, including a tradition of innovation in industrial and educational infrastructure to activate it. This includes 4 world-class research-intensive universities from Detroit to Houghton, represented by the Research R1 universities in Michigan. In 2024, Wayne State, the University of Michigan, and Michigan State University and Michigan Tech together generated $51.4 billion in economic footprint in Michigan. That's over 7% of Michigan's GDP. And collectively, we enroll more than 95,000 in-state students, most of whom, especially in MSU's case, remain here in the state of Michigan. That's a bragging right. We're a competitive bunch at Michigan State, and anyone who follows sports knows that a team needs to be more than the sum of its parts to excel. And that's the same for all of us. Without alignment of our amazing assets, we'll never compete with the best. And that's who we're up against in this global ecosystem. Here's some more good news. Today, we're going to hear from some people who will offer informed insight into how we can work together in Michigan as a formidable workforce competitor that we know we can be. And so thank you all for joining us. And please feel free to join in the conversation with thoughtful questions. And at the end of the program, we'll have more. Thank you.
Please welcome the Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs, Michigan State University, Laura Lee McIntyre. Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Optech LLC and Companies, and co-founder and chair of Digital Lakes, Rania Cruz. President and Chief Executive Officer of Henry Ford Health and chair of the 2026 Mackinac Policy Conference, Bob Riney. And to moderate the discussion, please welcome President and Chief Executive Officer of the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, Ridgway White.
Well, awesome. Brianna, thank you so much for introducing this panel and getting us going. We have an amazing group of people here today representing higher ed, technology, workforce, and healthcare and industry. And I think they're the right people to talk about one of the most important topics that we have in front of us, which is the workforce of tomorrow. So we're going to dive right into it. And I really want to just open it up. Ronnie, maybe we'll start with you. And what does it mean to think about the workforce of tomorrow and technology and all the things going together? How can this group work together to help steer policymakers, steer us in the right direction?
Yes, so thank you for the question, and thank you for having me today. This is a major topic that we're facing. Technology is moving so quickly, and a lot of organizations and talent can't keep up with all these changes, and there's a lot of fear going on across the organization. A lot of corporations, need to, cut costs, and their largest line item is labor. And so what we're seeing today is that we're seeing a lot of organizations wanting to leverage artificial intelligence for a lot of cost-cutting measures and trying to reskill and upskill the workforce. And a lot of kids coming out of school are really frightened. I mean, if you were to tally kids graduating from school, they're really concerned about the opportunities that are in front of them, whether there's going to be a position for them to go to. Because we're seeing a lot of positions being eliminated or being reduced, and then there's a bunch of new positions being created, which is really where the opportunities lie. And so I'm pleased to be part of the Green-White Council, because more than ever, we need to come together, industry, universities, philanthropy, government. We all need to come together, because workforce, talent solutions is everybody's job.
Awesome. Laura Lee, we all served on the Green and White Council together. Maybe you can address some of these fears that kids are saying. What is MSU doing to take us to so that the graduates are ready for the jobs of tomorrow?
Sure, thanks, Ridway. So last year, President Guskowitz convened the Green and White Council, and it brought together 17 industry leaders from across the state, from all sectors. And the Green and White Council was really charged with identifying some of the most complex problems in higher education, but across the industry, and thinking about how we can really partner together. And the charge was simple. What can we learn together through coordinated collaboration? What can industry inform higher education practices? How can higher education practices and how we're training and preparing our students also make an impact in terms of those pathways for workforce? We like to think about it as talent activation. We're a pipeline that produces graduates that stay in the state of Michigan. So broadly speaking, we brought together these 17 industry leaders, thank you for your service, and had some really in-depth conversations about gaps in workforce, so how we as an institution can prepare our students for jobs that we haven't even fathomed yet. So when you think about it, these students that are graduating this year are going to be in the workforce for probably 45, 50 years, and the jobs of tomorrow haven't even been identified. So we had a lot of conversations about what can we learn, how do we address those gaps, and then how can we connect our students to industries so that there are opportunities for internships and experiential learning, so that when our students graduate, they can be placed and stay in the state of Michigan and serve as that economic driver. So ultimately, the Green and White Council identified 3 initiatives that university leaders and faculty have, we've taken the ball and we've run with it, so to speak. And the 3 areas really had to do with emerging technologies and AI. So how do we prepare every single Spartan that attends MSU with the knowledge, skills, and preparation so that they can be technologically savvy? And our technologies are rapidly evolving. So it's not just a skill set that's one and done, it's a skill set that will evolve. And MSU and our higher education partners across the state can be trusted sources of information for upskilling and making sure that those skill sets that our employers demand of their employees are at the ready. The second, so AI Ready Spartans, the second initiative really had to do with career-connected Spartans. So one of our roles in higher education is preparing the workforce of tomorrow. We know it's more than just what our students get in the classroom. We see it as a partnership that's coordinated with healthcare, with technology, with the auto industry, with all of our industries in the state of Michigan. So how can we prepare our students so that they have the confidence and the skill set and the hands-on experience? And so we've rolled out a whole set of initiatives that really prepare our Spartans for the workplace in coordination with our partners. And then the third really leverages our strengths and skill sets in research to practice translation. So here with our research catalyst, we're partnering with industries and leveraging the skills and the expertise of our faculty. So as an example, we're looking at advanced manufacturing and packaging and supply chain and engaging in research opportunities. So it touches all of our primary needs that were coming out of the council and essentially opens the door for additional partnership and collaboration.
Awesome. And Bob, so you sit as one of the largest employers in Michigan. How do you think about working, and what's the role of industry to work with higher ed in informing what you really need for tomorrow?
Well, first of all, thank you all for joining this topic versus sitting on the porch in the sun. That tells us, that tells us a lot about your commitment to this very important topic, and we really do appreciate that. And second, in the spirit of collaboration, because this is going to take all of us, I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce Richard Bersenbach, who's the new president of Wayne State University. This is a fascinating topic, and you're going to hear later in the sessions throughout the next few days that we've got some daunting challenges as a state to overcome, and they're not small challenges, they're big challenges. But at the root of it is, can we create the experiential learning and the pathway to jobs that makes staying in the state of Michigan or coming to the state of Michigan an easy decision? And we're facing that with a backdrop of the fact that there's no roadmap for the jobs of the future from the past. And that's a little bit uneasy for all of us because of AI and because of the proliferation of digital-based learning. And so, we're making, to a certain extent, guesses, educated assumptions about what work will look like. And I think there's an opportunity there. I think it goes in a couple of buckets. One is we really need to look at skills versus a specific track to a specific job or a specific title. And that's a really important pivot to get your head around, because I have people all the time, young folks that say, what's my best path to become X? And I tell them, X may not exist by the time you get through that journey, but what will exist is a host of jobs that are going to require these experiences, these skill sets, these checks on curriculum and programs. And it sort of changes the thought process when you do that. But that requires that business and academic institutions work really closely together, because if we operate in silos, we'll never have that shared learning. And we're really happy, obviously, with our partnership with Michigan State to really do that, to make sure that the eyes of the employer and the strategic planning for business is directly aligned with the curriculum development. And the second area, which I feel really strongly about, is while AI and digital is going to automate us in ways that we have yet to probably even get our head around, we're going to be non-competitive if we lose teaching empathy and teaching relationship building skills, because those are always going to be core, no matter what technology is being supported. And so this goes back to the partnership on experiential learning, because that's where people are going to develop relationships. That's where they're going to be tested, by being in rooms filled with people that are very different than maybe their lived experiences and things like that. So I just think blending this together will give us a path that others haven't found yet at a time we really need it.
And I would argue that that's part of the value proposition of higher education, is putting people together in spaces where they have to challenge those critical thinking skills, that empathy, and you can't get that in your basement behind a screen taking online courses, that there's something about being in a community of learners that makes this so valuable.
Yeah, education was always about creating and smoothing out socialization. And if it becomes social isolation in itself, then we're really gonna, be behind the 8 ball.
I couldn't agree more. Historically, it seemed like industry and academia were in two ivory towers. They were not communicating. And because of the fact that we really need to move super quick and there has to be greater collaboration, we're seeing greater collaboration going on, which is really promising. And just to add on to what you said, Bob, when we look at skills, we look at clusters. The first group is the essential workers, people that make things, and those positions are not necessarily going to go away tomorrow. We still need the essential workers, and what they are going to be working with is smarter tools. The second category is the cognitive skills, and that's what we're going to school for, right? You know, accounting. That was my major, is accounting. But you have attorneys and finance majors and a number of different majors that require the knowledge-based worker, and those are being hugely disrupted by AI. Not saying they're going to go away, but certainly they're going to evolve. And we have to be really prepared for that. And there is a value to education in those roles. And then the third category are the human-centric roles, which are really important for obviously working in the hospital, caregivers, nurses. That can be done right now through robotics. But they're going to have to leverage AI and scheduling, and there are smarter tools to work with. And so looking at those clusters, we need to do a better job of advising our youth in exposing them early to these opportunities so that they have an opportunity to see what is it like to work in a hospital? What is it like to work in the automotive industry? Could I see myself? Because typically with the youth, they see what their parents do and maybe what they're exposed to. They don't understand the opportunities that are presented. And so it's our job to really give them that exposure to different positions that they wouldn't otherwise think of, and then connecting them with industries, and that's what we tried doing with Digital Lakes. Digital Lakes really went after youth as they're graduating from high school, freshmen and sophomores, to really expose them to opportunities, digital positions, and getting them connected with industries that they wouldn't even think of. Defense industries, which is a really growing area, utility, and all the great industries that we represent here in Michigan, so that they have a direction instead of coming out of school and not knowing what they're going to do and being underemployed. So that's why this is so important that we're having this discussion.
Yeah, and you touched on AI. This is obviously, we're all learning at the same time, right? And so how do you think about this for higher ed? I mean, your faculty, your students might know more than the faculty. How are you evolving faster
exactly.
than youth can adopt the tech?
I think it's true that the students become the teachers oftentimes. You know, this is a really important conversation that we're having on campus, and it's not unique to MSU, it's happening everywhere. But how can our curricula evolve swiftly, and how can we create the conditions under which students can be curious and creative and learn? And it takes a lot of work to engage with faculty. Faculty are the architects of the curriculum. So as much as, you know, our industry partners like to think that it's top down at universities, the governance is alive and well, and it's important to capitalize on our faculty's expertise. So one of the things that we're doing at MSU, and this is directly related to some of the recommendations from the Green and White Council, are we've actually put together requests for proposals and some funding for faculty to propose innovative courses that build on their strengths and skill sets and allow them to explore pilot new courses. We're developing courses where every Spartan that wants to be introduced to emerging technologies, AI, generative and agentic AI, that they have opportunities to take those courses. We're not mandating them because we believe that students can explore and have important discovery through that exploration, but we're creating a set of courses, faculty creating a set of courses that will allow us to expose students to things that they will need in the workplace and technologies that are emerging. This is both exciting to our faculty and then also, as you can imagine, daunting, because our faculty do not all agree about what's best for students and student preparation. So these partnerships are very important, partnerships with tech, partnerships with industry. We'd like to create an opportunity for every Spartan in their first year to explore courses and career and have that evolve over time so that they, when they graduate, they can enter the workforce prepared for jobs of the future.
I want to just make a comment on prepared because there's huge economic opportunity in doing this better as well. You know, if we blend the readiness aspects of work with the curriculum aspects of work and we integrate the emotional intelligence requirements with the intellectual, you know, requirements, then, you know, there's a lot of jobs now where people graduate and then you still need 6, 9, 12 months to integrate and orient them into a particular job at a company. We can move that upstream and lock individuals in, first of all, which is important from a retention standpoint in the state, but also save a lot of extra cost that goes into that. And there's no reason we can't do that. In fact, I would argue that we actually are doing it now, but it's hit and miss from an overall standpoint.
We can be more strategic.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, at the Mott Foundation, MSU has been a great partner. In Flint, Michigan, we have the CS Mott Department of Public Health, which has taken health and focused on an entire city and applied research in that way to really propel the entire community forward in a positive way. You're doing a similar partnership with Henry Ford on a massive scale in Detroit. I'd love to hear, Bob, you talk about that and how you're working together to create jobs and really bring faculty. It's one of the pillars. I think the third pillar of the Green and White Council was really how do we move Michigan forward? How do we move the state forward in terms of economic development? Because we're talking about jobs, but you have to create, you have to have companies that have jobs. And so I want the next graduate or researcher to invent the new AI tool for doing radiology or something. Like, how is that working? And is your partnership in Detroit focused on that at all?
I think that first of all, it starts with aligned values and aligned approaches to what we're trying to accomplish. So at Henry Ford, we have 51,000 employees, and on any day, we usually have 3,000 to 4,000 openings. So there's opportunity, and like most health systems and most companies, we have an aging workforce. So opportunities are going to continue to abound. What we're trying to do in our partnership with Michigan State is align the particular programs that we know we have a pipeline, and then actually work as a cohesive team in supporting that student on their journey. So, they're not looking at this as two entities, they're looking at it as a seamless entity wrapped around their career. And while there's nothing that would require them to continue employment within, like a Henry Ford in this case, obviously, once they are very well integrated and really feel like they're already a part of the team while they're attending school, it's the retention rate is going to be extremely high. The second thing we want to do is, you always look for what unique characteristics you can provide to enrich learning. And with our Detroit area campuses, and in particular Henry Ford Hospital, we can provide a different experience than you would in Lansing, simply because of the difference in demographics, the difference in some of the needs of the population, the difference in the political ecostructure and everything else. And so from a readiness standpoint, it provides a different laboratory for people to have experience. Sometimes students don't see that, but when you point it out, it instantly makes sense to them.
It's amazing for talent activation and for recruiting faculty. The partnership in our brand new, soon to be opened research building, and that's a great reminder of the partnership. We're hiring faculty that will accelerate the impact of the research. We're providing opportunities to students, graduate students, undergraduate students, clinical training for third and fourth year medical students, residents, interns and residents, and we're doing more than what we could do at any institution alone. And so when I think about our research innovation, our academic preparation, creating jobs for the future, the partnership really does exemplify those values and that shared commitment in topics, everything from the water, safe water, to cancer, to thinking about how we provide healthy food on the table, and really leveraging the land grant mission of Michigan State University is something that I'm so proud of. We're in 83 counties, and so that means the partnership, although based in Detroit and Lansing, exists in all 83 counties across the state, which is pretty spectacular.
And I think, I have a saying at work that we all spend too much time with usual suspects, and we need to get at tables with unusual suspects. And there's a great example of that we started to have discussions with it between Henry Ford and MSU. Food is a extremely influential part of one's health journey. As I was reminded that it wasn't that long ago in our history that food was our pharmacy. And now we have a pharmacy because of our food. And it's a really interesting kind of concept to think about. MSU has one of the greatest agricultural schools in the world. Who would have thought that healthcare and agricultural schools should work together in a very non-traditional way to drive health? But there's an amazing opportunity there.
And we have, in Flint, Double Up Food Bucks was the Detroit Eastern Market and the Flint Farmers Market were the first two sites in the country to have Double Up Food Bucks. And it was all about prescribing fresh food for kids. And that's why Dr. Mona Anatisha, somewhere in the audience here, she, before she innovated RX Kids, she started with putting her clinic above the Flint Farmers Market and said, I'm gonna provide fresh food, fresh fruits and vegetables to kids. So just amazing. Ronnie, tell me, so you deal with staffing and finding gaps for employers. You mentioned you have 5,000. How is the world changing in staffing? Are you seeing more college graduates into the mix, or is it still filling sort of an somebody that's out of work, or how do you see the role changing with AI, with transition to skills so quickly?
So you want my honest answer? So it's a really interesting time. In the talent space, typically, staffing firms are on the beginning of a recession or beginning of a recovery. And typically, there has to be transition from one job to another for opportunities to exist for a lot of talent firms. What we're seeing right now, because of the economy, is a lot of people are staying put. A lot of companies are reluctant to start new projects because the uncertainty that's going on in the market right now. Obviously, I don't need to talk to people about the different policies, whether it's tariff or the war or, and of course, the overarching AI. So a lot of companies right now, just say with the automotive industry, had to discontinue or reduce their investment in EV, and that has an effect on a number of different companies. And so they're posting huge losses. And it's really hard to invest in new projects that require people if we're reluctant to invest because we don't know what's going to happen. So when you're talking about graduates that are coming out of school, it's a challenging time for a lot of graduates because a lot of companies have cut back on new hires. They've cut back on a lot of internships. And we have 4 different generations that are in the workforce right now. And they're all at different stages of AI adoption. So I was having a conversation with my daughter yesterday, and she's going into her senior year in college at the other university. And she's really concerned being a marketing major with a minor in UI UX. And she also has a minor in art and design and saying, I'm really having a hard time finding a job. And she's not alone. There's a lot of kids that are coming out of school that are really finding a lot of challenges. And I can't tell you, I could tell you every year that was a challenge in being in business. I've been in business for 27 years. So I've been in the talent space and solution space for 27 years, and I've seen a lot of downturns in the economy and it's feast or famine. Either you can't find enough talent or you can't, the jobs are not plentiful. This graduating class is having a challenge, and that's why internships and getting early in with experiences, and I'm marketing digital lakes because these micro interns expose these kids to industries and opportunities. And one of the major factors is if they're able to see the opportunities and get connected with the right companies, they're more likely to stay here. Mm-hmm. And that's what we want. Any city, state, country that can attract this creative class will experience growth. And we can't ignore that. We need the talent to stay here in Michigan. Obviously, we want them, we need their minds for all the innovations to fill these positions. So we need to do a better job of directing these students, and that's why these partnerships are so important.
So just building on that, talk about how higher ed, healthcare, all of our infrastructure, we have amazing industry in Michigan. What do we need to do to ensure that we do retain the talent, the graduates of today?
Well, I could tell you, and I really love what MSU is doing with the Green and White Council, because they are having these discussions. And one of the things that is really critical, and I've been telling a lot of, doesn't matter what generation you're in, you need to understand AI. AI is critical. It's what digital literacy was 20 years ago. It doesn't matter what profession you're in, you have to have an understanding of AI. You have to be curious. You have to be a lifelong learner. You have to be a critical thinker. You have to be a great communicator and networker. This is what I tell students all the time. This is incredibly important, and I think that with the Green and White Council, they're doing a great job. I think we talked about it in one of our meetings, and all of a sudden it was deployed to all your schools, and you guys changed the curriculum. And I think it's important that academia is agile in their curriculum. I know historically, and I've been involved with universities for a long time, different universities, and typically one of the arguments was, well, we can't change our curriculum because we have adjunct professors and it's expensive and we can't bring in that new talent. Well, that is something of the past. We really have to be agile in making sure that we're training up students. And it doesn't matter what phase in your career you are, you have to be a lifelong learner, bottom line.
And the coordinated collaborations and partnerships are critical. Higher education needs industry, industry needs higher education. We're inextricably linked. And so the more opportunities we can come together and set our intention on driving economic development and setting the stage for students to be successful, it creates for very rich opportunities, not only for the students, but also for the industries in the state of Michigan that will be the recipients of those graduates. 2/3 of our graduates will stay in the state of Michigan, and we have an ethical obligation to prepare them for the jobs of the future. It's not second nature to be agile. It's not second nature to pivot so quickly. We have identified what those gaps are, and it is our responsibility to respond to those opportunities and to create the conditions within our classrooms and through our partnerships for our students to thrive, to stay curious, and to be exposed to the skills and skill sets that will serve them well over the arc of their career. Those jobs will change. I mean, they've changed for us, but instilling the confidence, and that comes from exposure to work opportunities, exposure to mentorship, internships that only our partnerships can bring, really goes a long way in preparing our students. I'm so proud that Michigan State University has been identified in the top 10 in terms of employability, so our students get jobs. We'd like to ensure that they're prepared for the jobs of the future. And so conversations like this, but partnerships through the Green and White Council and other mechanisms are critical for our shared future.
And Bob, talk about the investments you're making in Detroit. How is that a critical component, staying cutting edge in healthcare to attract the top docs, techs, nurses, everything tomorrow?
Well, we take a holistic definition to our responsibility as a health company. And you quite frankly can't elevate the health of a community if you're not elevating their academic health, if you're not their physical health, their mental health, as well as their economic health. And so part of what we're doing with the Detroit campus renovation is creating a holistic development that will create a new community, new jobs, and jobs that are really great jobs that people will want to grow and stay in. And so, we're taking a very holistic look and using partners, back to unusual suspects, around developing housing, around developing academic presence, and around developing a new campus of the latest design and innovation and care delivery. All three of those elements combined with park and open space really should appeal to people that not only want a place to work, they want a place to make a difference. And so we're looking at how we create something big enough and exciting enough that it creates economic spin-offs, people that want to be, companies that want to be around it, because it's a contagious behavior, right? Positivity, excitement are contagious. So is negativity. And what we find is, especially with young talent, they want to be surrounded by winners. You know, they want to latch on to something that feels good to them. We're also doing a lot of incredible leading edge environmental work in the development of this campus. That's also really appealing to these next generations. And so you've got to take a really holistic look. I think the other thing to your earlier question, we have a brand problem in my mind in our business verticals. We keep looking in the rearview mirror to define our business verticals. So, you know, when people say, do you want to go into healthcare? We test people. I mean, they have such a narrow view of what jobs that really means. If you talk about the auto companies, oh, I don't want to work in the auto companies. Well, why? And then they'll describe something they want to do that exists right in the auto companies or right in manufacturing. And so we've got to help people understand that if you're looking for innovation, you're looking for high tech, you're looking for AI, you're looking for the ability to get into market testing, product research, you know, all those things that are attractive to people, they exist in these verticals. You're just using a very aged definition of them. And I think that's another opportunity that we can partner together to change the language.
So we've got to upgrade the coloring books.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Starts there.
I would love to build on that because, once again, when we get to these students early and they have an opportunity to rotate to 3 different companies, they go into industries they wouldn't have otherwise thought of, like defense industry or utility or, you know, healthcare or healthcare insurance. And it's amazing to me how they're completely transformed. They go into industries. I think AM General, which is a defense contractor, they hired 7 people that would have otherwise never been exposed to the defense industry. So I think that's why early exposure, because to your point, you know, when you talk to these students about the automotive industry, they think of a very dated, old, you know, mentality, but wow, we have some of the best technology here, advanced manufacturing. We have I think we have the highest number of engineers that are here, cutting edge. And so there's fantastic opportunities for this young talent that we could retain here if we expose them to these opportunities.
Laura Lee, exposing to opportunities, that's part of the Green and White Council,
Yes.
right? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, the Green and White Council has spent a year of intensive meetings and opportunities exploring with one another about the best ways to position Michigan State University and our students to be successful once they leave our doors and enter our workforce.
But we all had to sign up, like how many people we could take from MSU.
I know.
And it was daunting because there were like 48,000 a year or something we had to take. So.
And how many did you sign up for, Ridgway?
I mean, the foundation staff was only 88. But we signed up for more, hundreds of jobs in Flint with the Masters of Public Health and research.
And yay, we need all of it for our state to continue to push forward and create the conditions for our students to flourish. So I moved here. I'm not a Michigander. I moved here from the state of Oregon with the promise that Michigan is going to be the destination, not only for myself, but for my family. And initiatives like the Green and White Council, where we're thinking collectively about what are the skills and the knowledge and the propensities to learning, the dispositions to learn, so that creativity, that cognitive thinking, that emotional intelligence, problem solving, as well as being exposed to emerging technologies and being fluent with emerging technologies. How can that transform our curriculum? So we're working on that right now. AI-ready Spartans. First priority. Second priority, career-connected Spartans. And it's exactly what you have articulated, Ronnie, with your work about exposing students very early on, young people very early on, to a wide range of careers. And so although our work is just beginning, we're recognizing that career counseling is a dated term. You know, when you were in college, you went to go see a career advisor or the career center, and we're recognizing that career preparation is distributed across our campus. and being able to expose students before they even enter our doors as matriculated students through our orientations and through opportunities to engage with us before they arrive as first-year students at Michigan State, expose them to different opportunities to explore career is critical. So we are piloting a program in year one, so post Green and White Council recommendations, we have hit the ground running. We're piloting a program that allows our students to access career platforms, be connected, so through this matchmaking process that you mentioned, and be connected to our strong alumni. We have over 550,000 living alum, over 300,000 in the state of Michigan. So we have a vast network at the ready, as well as industries who have signed up to support our students. So career connected Spartans is a very important element of the work. So early exposure, lots of opportunities to explore, and then try on different things. Our students are surprised at what they might learn. And then the third is leveraging our research and our faculty in solving real-world problems that industries are facing. So we've got a partnership with DART this year in phase one, where we're leveraging advanced manufacturing, supply chain, and packaging to solve some research problems that our industries are experiencing. So those three initiatives are our curriculum, kind of our talent activation. How can we prepare our students? How can we connect them to careers? And how do we leverage our research mission? Really set the foundation for all of the work that we're engaged in, coming directly from the Green and White Council. It's been a transformative experience for our campus. The recommendations are solid, the partnerships are strong, and we're going to circle back around to you and see if we can get more of you to sign up. So stay tuned. I'll be collecting business cards later.
I was going to say that we're at the Detroit Regional Chamber, and we are called to action, right? We need to change. And the call to action is to get more industry engaged in having more interns and participating, because we need to work on this problem collectively. We need to provide these opportunities to these students. So that's the call of action.
Yes.
So.
And more interns and more students in Detroit, I heard, Bob. We're ready.
There's a lot of Detroit employers here ready to sign up.
Raise your hand, right? They only need to, how many do we have to employ every year?
We have about 11,000 students that graduate every year. So I would say with room to grow. So we're looking for possibly 11 to 15,000 new jobs in the Detroit metro area. We're ready for that, right? We're built for that.
It's fun being on a council because we just say, all right, you got to employ every single student in a career of their choice, and then you say, go do it. So
the reality, though, is internships work. All the research shows it. And, Dan Gilbert has leveraged the internship model with his mortgage company really successfully for years, not only at getting new talent in, but getting people to relocate from all over the country to Detroit and then get hooked to an experience. And if it wasn't for the internship program, the results would be very, very insignificant compared to what he drives now. And so, this is not a new idea. It's an investment now for a great return later. But I think if we do it on scale collectively, then it's going to start changing the conversation and changing the cultural conversation about Michigan being a place to stay and a place to have your career journey. We got to make this bigger because there's a lot of benefit that comes with it.
It's jobs, but it's also the economic prosperity, the recreation, the places where you want to play and work and live, where you wouldn't want to go anywhere else for vacation because you have it. Well, maybe you'd come to the island.
I love Midwest nice.
Yeah.
I really do, but not if it means you're not competitive. We have to compete with other states, and that requires having fire in our belly for competitiveness. And I think we aren't where we need to be. Thus, make this very big, make this a movement, because that's how you overcome cultural barriers.
Awesome. We do have a little bit of time for questions from the audience. There should be somebody walking around with microphones. There's one gentleman there. Anybody have a question?
And while you're thinking of questions, if someone, let's just say, wants to announce a $40 million gift to name the new research center, we're not opposed.
I don't have any money, but I'll ask a question. Hi, Lauren Zakalik from Henry Ford. I don't know if this is urban legend, but I keep hearing this around that organizations are doing away with entry-level jobs because they can be done by AI. And so a lot of the students that are entering the workforce are not finding those entry-level jobs, so they can't get the experience to get into those secondary jobs. How do we grapple with that as people that are teaching, employing, and looking for jobs for some of these kids?
That is true. That is true. So we are seeing that. I can't speak for other employers, but we're seeing that a lot of clients that we deal with, a lot of consulting jobs, a lot of entry-level jobs have been reduced, but that could be a combination of the state of the economy. That's one. Two is repetitive tasks, some roles that could be, you could leverage AI, and the mere fact that I mentioned this earlier, that the largest line item is labor. And so a lot of organizations are trying to cut costs. How do we fix that? Is that obviously we need to invest in talent. And that's why I think it's really important that we still provide opportunities for entry-level students, because there's going to be a major gap in our workforce. We need to provide that foundational experience for these graduates that are coming out of schools and offer the internship. And AI can't do everything. I love technology. It is a major disruptor, but at the same time, we need the human qualities. We need the workforce to come into our organizations and gain that domain expertise and understand these various businesses for them to thrive long term.
I think AI readiness and fluency will become the norm. We're at a period of transition. And what will then differentiate our students will be the other skills that they possess, their ability to communicate, the ability to take the perspectives of others, the ability to show empathy, the ability to solve problems, the ability to bring together a team of individuals at a time of crisis, an ability to stay calm, to collaborate, to reach out. Those will become the differentiators. We are moving into a period where AI skills will be the new normal. So entry-level jobs will always be there. They will be different entry-level jobs.
I agree completely, but I'm going to also say that when times are tight economically, we have to help people hit the reset button on what their definition of an entry-level job is. And I think that we have to make a bargain, with people, that it's not a bad thing if you start as a food service assistant, and we'll work with you within a year to get you into a position for advance, because there are entry-level jobs. They're just entry-level jobs that we've decided collectively aren't what we're interested in, for a lot of very legitimate reasons. I'm not criticizing that, but if you can work for an employer that has a track record of advancing you from those roles, or you can actually make a deal, for lack of a better word, that it's part of a track to move to other things, I think that, eat a little humble pie and get to work, and you'll accelerate in the end quicker than you might otherwise.
That's a very good point, because we're seeing this from Gen Z. They want a particular role. They want to solve the world's problems right when they come out of school. And and I have 3 of them. So, I'm trying to advise them that any experience is a feather in your cap. You're going to learn. You're going to evolve. The job is going to change. You might decide that you like something, that you're doing. So I think that we do need to humble these kids too. I agree with you. They have to really, be open to learning and open to opportunities that may not fit exactly what they want, but you're going to learn and you're going to experience and you're going to evolve, and that's a good place to start.
Awesome. Any other questions? Got one in the back.
Hello, I'm Jordan Rocha. I run an engineering consulting firm out of Auburn Hills. One of the things that we're facing with our workforce, you'd mentioned retention, and everyone looks at AI sort of like this either cloud that's coming in that's going to provide rain and solve all of our issues, or create a bunch of issues. But if you look at the BLS data, we're seeing labor hours up, we're seeing productivity down, we're seeing automation go through the roof, yet it would seem that the efficacy of the productivity is down. And now we have this issue with the skilled labor force going away. How do we, academia and industry, sort of bridge this nexus with the next generation of the workforce and say, hey, the jobs are growing, AI is good and bad, and we're going to prepare you to go and take it on. Like, it's not going to take away your job. Right now, the data would show it's creating jobs.
It's a great question, and if any of us had the exact answer, we would probably be on the consulting circuit all over the country. But it's a timely question. What I will tell you is, at least at Henry Ford Health, we're working right now on a planning grant that we are very confident is going to lead to something much bigger from the Ballmer Foundation, about how, in part, we really take and create an ongoing learning environment from someone that you could potentially lift out of poverty, but then don't work with them that they've achieved a certain level and it's done. Continue to provide the experience, the exposure, the opportunities. So I think that's one. I think number two, we have to, post-pandemic, help reset things. And so, in full disclosure, and I have people on my own team that would fight me on this, but I'm not a fan of work at home strategies. And it's really not because of productivity in terms of a traditional sense. It's because what hooks people to grow and to learn and to continue to advance is feeling like they're an integrated part of the culture, and they're an integrated part of something bigger, than just the four-letter word work. And so you have to get real creative. You can't just say, well, come back to work. We've got to find ways to create environments that make people want to come into work, because it's got a really, exciting environment that helps them in their continuous learning and their continuous development. I don't know what the answer to that is, but you can see a lot of companies doing really creative things to create an environment. And I'm not talking about, take your pet to work day. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. I mean, that's not a bad thing, but that's not what I'm talking about. I don't want pet lovers to send me nasty grams. It's really, I'm talking about things where if you're in that environment, you're getting exposed to things that make AI exciting to you as opposed to threatening to you, because you're part of the development, you're part of the innovation, you're part of the testing, you're part of helping shape what it's going to do. And I'll give you just a real quick example of how that can play out in culture. We implemented an AI technology in one of our hospitals, and we're going to roll it out to a number of them. But one of the biggest challenges in hospitals is patients fall. They fall because they're disoriented, they're on new meds, et cetera. They re-injure themselves, they get longer lengths of stay, big issue, right? Nobody wants that. And there's been all sorts of ways to try and correct that. But humans want to be independent, and we don't want to ask for help. We want to just get up and use the restroom. So this technology, within 45 seconds, can tell movements of a patient in a bed and can program when they're going to be getting up and when they're not. And they can immediately notify the nurse, and the nurse can immediately say, Ms. Jones, I know you're getting ready to get up. Please wait, I'll be right there. Here's the part I want to share about this. When we worked with a group of nurses about this technology, you bring people together that include your most cynical about change. And we had a couple nurses in this circle say, okay, I've been through a lot of things. This may be the dumbest thing you've all put in front of us yet. You always love to hear that. But these same nurses, and I'm not making this up, after this implementation was done and they were part of it, said, this is one of the best safety things I've ever seen implemented in my entire career. So you have pivoted them from a resistor of AI to seeing something that they really care about, protecting their patients and helping them be their best selves. So I think it's a really relevant example of how we have to approach these issues.
All right, so we've got to do closing comments here. So if we do this right, we've got industry, government, higher ed. If we do it right, what does Michigan look like in 10 years? Ronnie.
Okay.
We had a minute or less.
Okay, really quickly, Michigan is the state of choice for people to want to live, work, and play. I want my kids back here.
Awesome. Laura.
Michigan is more educated, more prosperous, and more coordinated across industry, higher education, and government.
Michigan is the role model for the country in university, private, public partnerships around workforce. And we have become such a magnet that nobody's leaving for other reasons.
Awesome. C.S. Mott said, every person always exists in kind of individual partnership with their community. As the community succeeds, so does the individual. As the individual succeeds, so does the community. Love that everybody here is at the Mackinac Policy Conference, working to see our community succeed and individuals succeed and be a better state. So thank you all for being here. Appreciate the panel. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Across our Masco family of companies, our goal is to deliver better living possibilities and make positive changes in the neighborhoods where we live, work, and do business. Masco, a Michigan company since 1929.
Support also provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit PBS.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit PBS. Through our giving, we are committed to meeting the needs of the communities we serve statewide to help ensure a bright and thriving future for all. Learn more at dtefoundation.com.
Nissan Foundation, and viewers like you.
And welcome back to the Mackinac Policy Conference. Let's turn now to two journalists who know this conference well. Rick Pluta, Senior Capital Correspondent for the Michigan Public Radio Network, and Chad Live and Good Politics Editor at the Detroit News. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
I'm not going to ask you both to count how many conferences this is for you. It would be too much. We'd be here all day counting.
I already got asked to count because Katie Kilby, our photographer, this is her first conference.
Okay.
And I counted 10.
Okay. Okay.
So
yeah,
I missed a few, various life things, and we missed one in 2020.
Sure, right. There was the COVID years. Chet, let's start right out of the gate with just the stunning news last week that former Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan dropping out of the race for governor. What does this mean for this conference?
Well, it definitely kind of turns the coronation of Mike Duggan on its head. That was what was sort of planned by the Detroit Regional Chamber. This is their turf. And he was their candidate, and they were planning to roll out the red carpet for him. A largely pro-Duggan crowd to begin with, so it wasn't like there was a lot of persuasion going to be going on. But all that script had to essentially get set afire last week, and so how this plays out to sort of the politics on the island now it's sort of a show of who's going to be jockeying for a position in the governor's race.
Yeah, we are now going to have sort of a 1-to-1 race, at least after the primary. But Rick, I want to go back to the decision from Mike Duggan. You know, he announced in a stunning way, not that he was running for governor, it was sort of an open secret that he was going to run, but that he was going to run as an independent. And just as shocking that he dropped out, and early.
So early that, and you know, his explanation, his rationale was that, I mean, his rationale was basically what made the case for a Governor Duggan, which is someone who accepts reality and acts decisively in the face of that, which is, you know, what he appeared to do. And what really stunned and flummoxed a lot of the people who are here is that he did it before this particular conference, which was filled with the same group of people who really, really wanted him to run.
As Chad was saying, right?
Yeah, and what he said last week was, I can't keep telling my supporters to keep sending the checks if I know that I can't get the real big money. I mean, this has been the challenge from the start. There's a Republican Governors Association, they'll be in for $100 million. A Democratic Governors Association, another $100 million. There's no such thing as the Independent Governors Association. IGA is only a brand in a supermarket, essentially. But so Mike Duggan was going to have to go find a magical group of billionaires around the country that would want to throw in on this kind of campaign. And he's been traveling both coasts trying to find the money, and he just simply wasn't. And then the variables have changed the political dynamics for the fall election in favor of Democrats. Right. I mean, Mike Duggan could not have predicted in December of 2024 that Donald Trump would just start a war with Iran, and that we would have a huge standoff over the shipment of oil in the Strait of Hormuz, and have $5 gas for the foreseeable future. And so all these variables just kind of changed on Mike Duggan in ways that he could not control. And this is a politician who has largely controlled his own destiny, and just simply was, couldn't figure out a way to manage or maneuver this one.
Yeah, it was almost like, that Mike Duggan was a political science lab rat experience, and then the variables just went all a-kilter.
So let's get back to the conference, Chad. The Mackinac Policy Conference always takes on a different life in an even year election, right? So we're talking about this election, but it's not just a gubernatorial race. This really is a year unlike any others, when you've also got Attorney General, Secretary of State, this open U.S. Senate race, the entire State House, the entire State Senate. What are you watching for at this conference vis-a-vis election 2026?
I think there's set aside candidates. I think there's some big overarching issues that are festering among voters, and you see this in the polling the Detroit Chamber commissioned, that 55% of Michigan voters do not want to live within 25 miles of a data center. That gives a whole different new definition to not in my backyard. Not even in my neighboring county do I want a data center, essentially, is what they're saying. And so you're seeing in the programming up here that they're going to be talking, I mean, there's a lot of processing of data centers on the agenda between the Ricoltas, father and son, the chamber itself. Former Governor Jennifer Granholm coming back to her first Mackinac conference since her last year as governor to essentially push data centers. Now she's a consultant in the clean energy space, and so this issue is sort of like front and center for a lot of business leaders, but it's also front and center for a lot of voters. And voters are going to be deciding a lot of thorny issues. I mean, the other one that's percolating right now, tomorrow, this mop-up group, Michiganders against money in politics, is going to try to they claim they're going to turn in more than enough signatures to get a ban on DTE consumers, Blue Cross, and state contractors from giving money in politics. I mean, this would be a sea change if such a thing were to be enacted in our state law, and it's essentially a declaration of war on the big utilities and Blue Cross, which I'm kind of calling the non-automotive big three.
Rick, what are you watching for?
You know, I mean, it's maybe it's a little wonky, and I've already started asking around about it. But you know, we are going to see, speaking of sea changes, you know, a new governor, new secretary of state, a new attorney general, you know, all the offices that you just listed, and people don't win elections on, you know, the status quo. You win elections running against the status quo. Big change. And how can we what will happen bringing in this new crop of decision makers when it comes to creating durable policies that businesses can live with? Because I mean, businesses want low cost, they want a good workforce, they want value, and they want predictability. And all of this is not necessarily a recipe for that. And that is something that the leadership at this conference are talking about. How can you get the leadership that you want, but also encourage an environment where you are creating solutions that are going to outlast the people who are elected in the upcoming campaign cycle?
I mean, Chad, it's part of being a swing state, right? We're a purple state. And so what we do is we don't just swing back and forth between parties, we swing back and forth between policy.
Yeah. I mean, just a couple years ago, everyone here was just trying to get a battery plant built. We've got a couple battery plants built, but none of them are really producing batteries. That's partly because of the change in the national policy on electric vehicles, but it's a very, very good example of how our policies change. Now we're on to data centers and trying to essentially, you know, catch the AI train before it leaves the station. And so that is reflected in this conference and what is on the agenda and what's also being discussed on the porch.
Yeah. Rick, Chad was talking about new polling numbers released. Some of the polling numbers had to do with Governor Gretchen Whitmer and her job approval rating. 52% of voters approve of the job she's doing. It's pretty unusual, Rick, for a second-term governor to be above water like that.
Exactly. It's like, you know, except for Gretchen Whitmer, you know, on your way out the door and things are looking great. You know, who wouldn't want to have poll numbers like that at this point in administration? But the question is, on her way out the door, is there a way for her to leverage those relatively popular numbers into some sort of, you know, lame duck policy making?
Is that worth it?
Yeah.
Chad Livengood, politically. I mean, policy-wise, it's worth it.
It depends on what Gretchen Whitmer wants to get out of it.
Yeah.
If Gretchen Whitmer wants to continue to sort of play safe and, you know, maybe hedge her bets for her possible national ambitions, then you're not going to see Gretchen Whitmer take a lot of chances in the next 6 months. But you know, depending on how the outcome of the election will dictate, you know, what kind of things might happen in lame duck.
But she's a lame duck already.
Yes. Yeah. I'm talking about the session itself, but yes, she is certainly a lame duck. And so, what does she want to be her last hurrah is kind of still up in the air.
Yeah.
But some of this economic policy is the big you know, elephant in the room, and so we'll see if they want to, you know, advance that. And I think just getting the budget passed is going to be more of a challenge.
Well, she said that's
especially when Republicans are out trying to cut property taxes.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not forget. I mean, the House of Representatives last week passed like a $5 billion tax cut for property taxes in the state with no replacement revenue. I mean, Matt Hall, the Speaker of the House, continues to sort of play hide and go seek with the replacement revenue because he says there's going to be a service tax on sales tax on services, but he's called it luxury, but not really defined how he's going to come up with $4 or $5 billion taxing, you know, corporate jet rides and green fees at country clubs.
Are there that many corporate jet rides in order to
to make
be
up
able
$5
to?
billion?
Seems like it's going to be hard. So yes, I mean, but once he starts, you know, what we've seen in the past with sales tax on service, once you start essentially opening up Pandora's box of, okay, we're going to be taxing car washes and baby shoe bronzing, then it becomes kind of a free for all. and the only people that will benefit probably from that kind of debate will be the lobbyists.
Yeah, okay.
Because they'll be get to sign up every baby shoe bronzer around.
We're back to
town.
baby shoe bronzing again. It takes us way back. You brought up the budget in the couple minutes that we have left, Chad. Where do things stand right now? We've got a House budget passed, a Senate budget passed. Are negotiations actually happening?
We haven't seen a lot of evidence of negotiations going on, so that's why it's kind of questionable if we're going to make this phantom June 30th deadline.
Yeah.
But it probably won't happen. I mean, if we were going to sit here and guess, because this is politics, and they're going to try to hold out, and House Republicans really think they've got a hot issue with property taxes in the affordability debate right now, and that everyone is trying to vie for some way to go back and tell voters we're trying to lower your costs, and so the property tax is a real easy one, even if they don't really have a real way to actually replace the revenue and not defund their schools and cities.
Yeah, there is one particular hard deadline though, and that is Election Day. And so what is the political price going to be for which course you take? Will voters take it out on you if their local governments are saying, we need our budgets now? If your school boards are saying, we need our budgets now, and it's not done.
Yeah, exactly. That is Rick Pluta, Chad Livengood. Always good to have you at the big desk. Thank you so much.
It's good to be at the big desk.
And we are now going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Remember in those days, a lot of their friends from the South settled in the same neighborhood.
My family is actually from Jamaica, and I am the first person in the city of Detroit.
Well, my family's originally from Honduras. I was born there, but I was brought up in Detroit.
Detroit is more than a city. It's a story. It's America's story. And Detroit's story is intertwined throughout every one of us. Hard workers, creative thinkers, and adventurous spirits. 4 million people, one story. From members of tribal lands who still call this land home, to the earliest days of our young country, those who saw opportunity, shaped lands, formed neighborhoods, and drove Detroit to be the automotive capital of the world. And today, we are a city and a region, vibrant and dynamic, poised to meet the next 250 years. Detroit is opportunity. Detroit is resilience. Detroit is transformation. Detroit is a quintessential American city. No matter how the spirit of Detroit flows through your veins, you have a story to tell. Destination Detroit tells this evolving story, connecting the past, the present, and the future through community voices, powerful storytelling, live discussions, and immersive experiences.
When I was 8 years old, our family got sponsored from a refugee camp in Thailand.
My mother came up, she was born in Forsyth, Georgia.
They were from, southern Illinois and western Kentucky.
And in recognition of America 250, Destination Detroit honors this central chapter in our nation's history, because this story of us should be told by us. This is your story, our story, the story of Detroit. Join us and help tell America's story.
You know the feeling, the drive to discover, to excel. At Kettering, you'll test your ideas right away. You'll push them, break them, and rebuild them to solve what's next. Not everyone has your grit and vision, but Kettering isn't for everyone. It's for you.
Welcome back to the 2026 Mackinac Policy Conference. As Michigan policymakers confront growing challenges around housing, foster care, homelessness, and food insecurity, let's talk with three nonprofit and social service leaders on the front line. Kelly Dobner, Chief Strategy and Growth Officer for Samaritas, Kevin Roach, CEO of MCHS Family of Services, and Ryan Hurt, CEO of Lighthouse. So good to have you three here with us.
It's really good to be here.
So Kelly, as I mentioned, Michiganders are facing pressure on multiple fronts, right? There's affordable housing, there's homelessness, food insecurity. I'm curious, are these separate crises in your mind, or are they all connected through just sort of larger systemic challenges in the state right now?
Yeah, it's both and.
Yeah.
Definitely. Each one of those presents its own crises, but they're definitely intertwined, together. We're seeing a lot of families struggle with homelessness like we haven't seen before, and affordability. They're also struggling with gainful employment opportunities. At the same time, we're seeing for the first time in a long time I can remember a significant need for basic needs to be fulfilled, and they know there are potential more cuts, that are coming that are going to impact them. So by way of example, we can have a family that is struggling with addiction. We're providing them with the right services, getting them on the road to recovery. They have a gainful employment opportunity, but they're still living in their car, right? Because there just is not enough affordable housing as part of that safety net to be able to help families in times of crisis, much less sustain the situation that they're in once they achieve some independence and success.
Yeah, I think it's a question that needs to be asked. Why? Why are we at this point now? You said it's increasing.
Yeah. Well, the housing crisis is a significant issue right now. We know that. I hate to even use the word affordable housing because it has its own stigma that comes with it. And if we're being really honest, everything is inaffordable right now, when it comes to housing. And we have families that are changing. I mean, families used to be 4.2 members, right? Yeah. Today, they're more like 2.3 members. Yeah. And so we have smaller families, but we're not necessarily building the right infrastructure to support those families. Yeah. And so you're leaving people homeless or with very little options to be able to respond.
Yeah. Kevin, MCHS Family of Services is going to become the largest foster care agency in Michigan. Where are the greatest unmet needs right now?
I think that when you think about really where those unmet needs are, a lot of it does tie into what Kelly was saying with Humanitas, right? That we know that this is all interconnected. Mm-hmm. And so to say that for one family, it could literally be housing. Another family, it could be food insecurity. Mm-hmm. A third, it could be the cost of childcare, right? We know that there's many contributing factors that will lead families into these type of situations. And when we think about, certainly from our vantage point at MCHS, we know that for one thing, this doesn't discriminate, right? On this end, there's a lot of families, a lot of households who are being impacted or who are feeling kind of the rebound effect from just a few years ago. And so for us, right, we're meeting these families where they're at and trying to figure out what those community needs truly are, because they do slightly shift based off of certainly what community or what household you're speaking to.
When you say meeting them where they need to be met, what does that mean? What does that look like on the ground?
I think, it's the basic needs, right, that it takes to have a growing and thriving family and to make our community stronger on this end. And so when we allow our families to partner with us and figuring out what that next chapter is, they get to define it, right? And that can look so many different ways based, once again, what their experiences are, whether this is generational, whether this is something brand new, or certainly whether it's a two-income household or a one-person household, or certainly in a lot of our families' cases where it's a new family coming together.
Ryan, Lighthouse is building a major new central campus in Pontiac. What gap is the project designed to fill?
Well, our original vision for the campus redevelopment was really on the tail end of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so when we saw a huge increase in basic needs, emergency services in our community, we stepped up to meet that mostly in the space of emergency food and emergency shelter. We did that through renting large amounts of warehouse space and purchasing large amounts of food for distribution, and through using hotels in our community. And so the campus redevelopment was really focused on what is the best of the best when it comes to models of delivering these services that we learned during that period at scale, and how do we invest from a capital perspective in what we need to deliver on that sustainably in a dignified way that meets the needs of the people coming to us today. It happened right after our merger that was really focused on Lighthouse and South Oakland Shelter coming together to focus on longer term solutions. So really housing, development of affordable housing, really addressing the environmental barriers for families that are trying to reach some level of financial sustainability. And so we did kind of have to go back to our roots a bit on investing in emergency services, but concurrently we're working on a large number of affordable housing projects throughout Pontiac, Oakland County, and Detroit. really focusing on when people come to us for emergency services, what's our best hope for where these folks are going to land, and what is or is not in the local marketplace to empower them to succeed.
Yeah. You use the word dignified. Say more about that.
Well, really, to Kelly's point earlier about stigma. So we're a poverty alleviation organization, and so we're working with people that are impacted by all of these issues: housing, food, gas prices, everything. Right now, really there's really very little relief. And we're talking about the population who's impacted by those issues, who's most stigmatized, as Kelly put it. And so what that means is it limits our imagination around policy solutions. Oftentimes, we're driven more by narrative than fact in the world. And so when we think about somebody who's impoverished, and we think about what do we as a society tend to believe about impoverished families, we think policy solutions are about what we tend to believe and feel about it. We want to see them be more productive. We want to see them get back on their feet. And when we think about things like affordable solutions, et cetera, that can sound like enabling when in reality it's empowering. When we actually see what happens when we make those investments, it's really empowering. And so for me, what it means to provide dignified solutions is to invest in people for who they are, to believe in people, to believe in their capacity, and see what we do for them as an investment in their future and an investment in our community and in our workforce, as opposed to something else.
Kevin, what does that look like for you?
We often say, certainly in our work, whether it's on child welfare, mental health, and certainly on the housing end, that you either pay for it now or you pay for it later, right? And so I think to Ryan's point, right, we know that at some point this is going to come to a head, right? And at some point we have to figure out when do we actually get that momentum and have some new solutions and some new pathways to those solutions, or if we're just kind of still doing the same thing over and over again with our lawmakers, with our funders, with certainly those community leaders on this end. We know that that's going to come at a price at some point or another. Oftentimes, though, solving that now and tackling those issues head on in the current moment is a lot better than kicking that can down the road.
Kelly, I'm curious. I heard Ryan say we're sort of thinking too small when it comes to policy solutions. I'm hearing that we can't keep kicking, the can down the road. What would a solution right now look like if you could sort of wave a magic wand?
Wave a magic wand.
Yeah, right?
Yes. I love when I'm asked that question.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure.
Right.
Just solve all the world's problems.
Just solve all of them at once.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. No, I mean, I really think that that's an important question, because we're in a very important moment in time.
Yeah.
How do we respond in this moment makes a big difference.
Right.
Not only for now, but into the future. And that's one thing, given everything that's happening around us, creating clarity through that chaos and responding in this time to be not only responsive, but proactive, applying innovation. I mean, that's one of the things that we're looking at for the sector at Samaritas, and with great partners like Ryan and Kevin and so many others, to be able to come together and look at things differently, recognizing it's not just about program or how contracts are written. It goes along with the notion that we belong to each other. We're a community, and policy has to follow that, and so does funding. And so applying innovative new ways of accomplishing all of those things, I think, is going to be the name of this game in this point in time right now.
Yeah, Ryan, I'm curious your thoughts too. You were saying that we're looking too small. What does looking larger or outside of the box look like to you?
Over the last few years, I've been sort of championing the idea that we need to think about housing the same way we think about agriculture, right? And so thinking about it from the framework of, we don't stigmatize people because there isn't a market to produce a certain produce, right? We subsidize it because we know we're going to need it, and we know that if the market doesn't support the production of it the way that our market requires, that we should subsidize that, and it's to everyone's benefit. If we start thinking about housing that way, I think we might be able to get somewhere. Right now, we have really specialized solutions for low-income people that are extremely expensive, and we could reduce the cost of production across the board. And I want to give credit, I think at the state level, that the Michigan State Housing Development Authority has come a long way on that front, looking at ways to subsidize across the market, and recognizing that people that we serve at Lighthouse who are experiencing poverty there's a positive impact on them when we meet the needs of mid-income and even higher income people by creating more product on the market, and that there's less expensive ways to get there than to only solve for the most acute. So I think thinking bigger is really looking at housing as something that our economy needs and not something that we stigmatize someone for not being able to afford it, when most of the people we're serving are really hardworking people.
Yeah. Kevin, who needs to hear that message? I mean, I'm hearing you three sort of all have these solution-oriented mindsets, but who needs to hear that? Who needs to be at the table?
I think that's a great question, being here at the Mackinac Policy Conference, right, where we do have that mixture of different makers, of those thought leaders who can certainly come together, whether it's the public sector that we desperately need, right, and the great relationships and the great work that is being done under the Whitmer administration needs to continue to whoever takes over and rents that office for the next 4 years, right? Along with, of course, the philanthropists, nonprofit sector, and just anybody that, once again, is coming to the table and thinking about this, not just in the next year or the next 2 years, but thinking about this from the long term, right? So that we're not revisiting these conversations every few years or once a decade on this end and looking around and wondering who's going to step up and actually have some of these answers, right? The answer about policy solutions and what that magic wand looks like is certainly, there's no shortage of magic wands that are going to be needed, right? And if everybody's willing to pick up their wand and offer a policy suggestion or a change in the law, whether it's with the zoning issues or with renting or subsidies or anything along those lines, right? We know that it's really going to take as many people to come to the table and say, if we want to envision a stronger community for the next generation that comes after us, this is what it's going to take.
Yeah.
Someone we need at the table who is not at the table in a serious way right now is the federal government. I think when it comes to philanthropy and it comes to our state policy, we're really moving in the right direction. Currently, we're seeing efforts to go in the opposite direction at the federal level, looking at issues like housing instability and saying we have a larger number of people who are homeless at this time than we've ever had in this country, and therefore we need to divest from the solutions that we've been investing in without necessarily recognizing the nuance of those who have been invested in are successful. When we've not invested enough at scale in order to meet the scope of the need, it can look like policy solutions that actually are very effective aren't effective, and we can find ourselves in an even worse situation if we go in the opposite direction. And right now I think we're at risk of that, and most of the resources that come through our housing system are federal resources. They're being leveraged through our state agencies like MSHDA, but the low-income housing tax credit is an IRS tax credit, right? Investment in permanent housing, most of those funds are coming through the continuum of care program at HUD, and so if we don't see progress at the federal level, all of our jobs are going to be a lot harder at the local level.
Brian, Kevin, Kelly, important conversations. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you so much for shedding light on this.
And we head now to the next session.
other events, including the open cocktail hours. So I appreciate that we seem to have a bunch of dedicated folks interested in learning how to address and solve Michigan's housing crisis. I am Jordan Hermany. I'm a Capitol reporter with Bridge, Michigan. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit newsroom based in both Lansing and Detroit. And as part of my work, I've done a ton of reporting on housing, but not just that, I've also personally lived what it feels like to be a young person trying to buy a home in this state. Let me just say, it wasn't easy and it involved 30 bids on different houses. All that to say, though, today we're here to talk about solving that crisis, about the barriers to entry, and just hearing the perspectives on what it will take to get us to the other side. So let's get into it. I feel like recently, the housing crisis has been something that's been on pretty much everyone's minds. It's been something that we're starting to see a growing bipartisan agreement that this is a crisis. I'd like to start with you, Director Hovey. What's changed in the last 3 to 5 years to make Michigan in the midst of a housing crisis?
I mean, I think we have been in the housing crisis for more than 3 years. We still have a big gap between what it costs to develop housing and what Michigan families can afford to pay. So the market just can't get out of the crisis on its own. We also have been seeing that, we've seen a reduction in folks in our labor industry. Now that's starting to recover over the last 3 years. We're starting to catch up to where we need to be in that area. I think we've seen some good commitment from the state government and federal government to provide funding for housing. We've seen an increase in the LIHTC to 12%, which 12% increase, which will result in more housing being developed. But we've also seen some negative impacts. We've seen our income stay relatively flat while the cost of housing continues to go up. We've seen tariffs go into place, which have increased the cost of developing housing in our state. So we've got a long way to go. We at MISHDA have invested $2.6 billion last year into housing. So we know we're doing some things right. We know we're bringing additional partners to the table, leveraging what we are getting from the federal and state government. So lots of things are impacting our housing market right now.
And at the federal level, Senator Slotkin, what would you say has changed in the last 3 to 5 years to make this a crisis?
Well, I mean, I think the story, because when you become a senator and people are literally talking about housing, no matter whether you're in Grand Rapids or Detroit or Traverse or Marquette, and everywhere in between, especially rural areas, you try to get to the root of things. And I think for me, it was kind of an aha moment when I understood that the story actually is like a 2008 and beyond story. And we just stopped building as much housing. COVID hits, right? Everybody's trying to move and trying to kind of, and is hunkering down. We are just short 4 million units of housing across the country at this point. So it's a supply and demand problem, right? And it is, until we deal with that supply problem, we can have all the policies we want at the federal level about who can own property, who can't own property, how you do public-private partnerships. All that stuff is on the table, but it doesn't change your situation of trying to buy a house until you increase supply. So there's actually a housing bill that has passed through the Senate that's passed through the House, a slightly amended version, and we now have to put it together. Only in this environment is something getting done when it's as desperate of an issue as housing and as bipartisan of an issue as housing. And it's good. It's a good bill. But I have been sort of obsessed with the supply problem and getting ahead of that. And, a developer, there's probably some developers in the room, they're just not going to lose money on a property, right? They're not we wouldn't want them to build a piece of property that they're going to lose money on. Until we get that math right, we're going to have a real problem in the state and throughout the country.
And Laura, at the local level, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just pick up right after the senator. In Detroit, we too often have the dynamic where you start a project already underwater. And so until we address that dynamic, we're not going to see projects at scale. We're going to see perhaps well-intentioned, kind-hearted individuals who are really desperate to make it work, working to make it work, but that's not going to address the hundreds of thousands of units that need to be created in Detroit and beyond.
Gotcha. And I did neglect to say at the top of the hour, you do have note cards on your table, and we will have time at the end for a Q&A session if you would like to fill those out. Someone will be around to pick them up, and we will be able to get to those at the end. The last 10 minutes we do have reserved for Q&A. But you talk about the issues that we're facing, obviously supply being one of them. And I guess, Laura, let's start with you. What are we seeing as some of the top barriers to just increasing housing supply?
Well, one of the things that I think we could talk a little bit more about too is the effect of interest rates, right? Interest rates have increased. That has put a pressure on two sides of the market. It's put pressure on people who are not wanting to move to a new place, and it's also put pressure on construction. And so you're really seeing this like increasing small window of opportunity for housing developers and for people who are interested in moving. And then add on to that, with the state of Michigan, we have Prop A. And that, especially in the city of Detroit, where you've got many people who are really long-time homeowners, they are not going to be able to move because they'll just see their property taxes jump right up. And that discourages people from moving into the city of Detroit too. So we have all of these dynamics that we've all articulated at the local, state, and federal level, and those really just continue to pile on. And I think maybe to jump to a few questions from now, like we can't expect to fix any one of these problems in isolation. We're going to have to learn how to walk and chew gum at the same time, and that means thinking really creatively about how to layer solutions together, how to take a big swing, a big bite at the apple, and work creatively together across the public, private, philanthropic sector to make a real change.
Senator Slotkin, I saw you nodding your head a second ago. Would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think given how important owning your own home is to the American dream, like it literally feels fundamental to who we are as Americans, that, if you've made it, then you're able to buy your own home, start building some equity and have something to pass on to the next generation. That given how in the hole we are on units across the country, to me, I've talked about like declare a housing emergency. We've declared an emergency on everything else. We declared an emergency against Canada, like declare an emergency on housing and put that big and bold energy towards something that I think every American really feels in their bones. And I think it's true that you can't just kind of pull one string and be like, great, we're done with the housing crisis. But there are things that we can do. They're just bigger and bolder, right? If you declare a housing emergency, I mean, this is where I think the energy should be put. There is certainly something to be said about helping with supply, so helping our developers, give them federal low-cost loans or no-cost loans so they can buy lumber, buy materials, bring down the overall cost. Suspend a ton of regulation, particularly redundant regulation, federal regulation from housing. It is ridiculous. Some of especially in places like Grand Rapids, you're getting like 3 different departments and agencies doing the same review and having to show like that they've done the environmental study. I want the environmental study. I don't need 3 of them, right? From different agencies. And then the other one that's harder to swallow, I'm sure for even people in this room and at this conference, is local regulations, right? Rules in our small communities. I think we as Michiganders have to understand that if we want to grow, we have to be willing to be creative on our local policies. If you're in Holland, Michigan, or Traverse City, or even Mackinac, right? I was meeting with the council this morning, and look, what could have more local restrictions than Mackinac, right? 80% of this island is owned by the state, but they've got to push themselves. If you want more people living here, you're going to have to do more and more creative stuff and look inward and own it, just like we need to own it at the federal level. So those are things that hit different ears differently. But without something bold, then we're just going to kind of be biting at the margins and not really dealing with that fundamental supply problem.
So, Director Hovey, I'm curious, maybe what you see as potential red tape, as the Senator mentions, there might be redundant studies to be done, disconnect there. What do you see as some of the red tape that the state could potentially address to expedite housing building?
I wanted to answer the last question.
And you can as well.
Certainly there is red tape that can be alleviated, right? Like we have it within our own agency, and we've been working really hard at trying to improve our systems to make it easier to access our funding, to not make people do things twice, to use a similar pro forma to what other agencies use so folks can get money from more than one agency without having to do twice as much work. We've had some success, and we're still working at it. So let me be clear. I think it's very important to have pro-housing local governments. So some of it is quickening the permit process, some of it is getting the zoning right, some of it is just being welcoming to developers. So we have some cities like the city of Jackson who literally calls developers asking them to come and develop housing. Developers can go anywhere. They want to go where it's easiest to get the housing built, and that is the kind of thing that we're seeing. But it is not enough. You can have the most pro-housing community that takes, has low parking restrictions, allows for high density, does inspections quickly, and also does approvals quickly for site plan and all of that. It is still not enough. We want to increase home ownership. We've got to deal with the cost of housing. The average Michigan family can afford $175,000 in a mortgage. There is not very much supply out there for $175,000, and it costs a lot more than that to build a new house. But we do know, and I agree with the Senator, home ownership is the most stable type of housing for any family. And we are working hard. There's a federal program that you're probably familiar with called Housing Choice Voucher, or Section 8, which is rental assistance. They allow you, the federal government will allow you a certain percentage to turn that Section 8 voucher into a mortgage voucher. So we can get somebody into home ownership. The government continues to pay that portion, except for to a landlord, they're paying it into a mortgage for 10 years. That comes coupled with lots of classes to build people's financial self-sufficiency. But that gets people into home ownership, saves the government money, because every year rent goes up on those vouchers. Every single year it costs us more. But if they were in a mortgage, that mortgage stays constant, right? So we could, if we want to be bold, we can take that program and make it a priority at the state, right? We also have other homeownership programs that could help folks get into housing. One which we're piloting with Tobias Harris in the city of Detroit, which allows for up to 40% down payment assistance, which is about where families are in needing to get into a house. They need about 40% in down payment assistance. It is also an investment. It is not a handout. So it's just for the city of Detroit right now, up to 40%. It's a silent second, so it stays until they sell the home, then they repay it. And they pay equal amount of appreciation. So if they took 40%, they pay the 40% back plus 40% of the appreciation. So if the state decided to take that statewide and continue to do that, they would only need to invest for a few years, and then that would continue to repay as those mortgages, as people move, and they'd be able to reinvest it. One thing I love about this program too is if you don't take the full 40%, you can come back. We know from our mortgage portfolio, and we did over $1 billion in mortgages last year, so we have a really large portfolio. The first couple of years are the most risky for any new homeowner, and they often go into foreclosure for a couple of things: a major home repair, loss of a job, or a major medical instance. With this program, if they only took 30% or 25%, if they need to come back, they can come back up to that 40%. So it not only helps families get into homes, but it helps keep them in homes. This is a bold idea that I am trying to increase outside of the city of Detroit because I think it's important, and I think it'll get a lot more people into homeownership.
A moment ago, Senator, you looked like you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason why we talk about this so much, yes, housing is connected to the American dream, and I feel that very acutely, but I don't think the average Michigander understands how existential it is for us as a state to grow. I think we're different than like a Colorado, where they can't afford housing there either, but it's because of just the massive number of people who have moved in there and driven up the cost. That is not where we are. We're not unable to buy a home. You aren't unable to buy a home because you have so many peers that have moved here that you're in deep competition with those peers. We have a different problem. And if we do not figure out how we can be a way where young families can live here, then people are gonna leave. They're gonna go somewhere else. We all know we already have that problem, right? And we need young families coming here, because if we do not grow our population in 10 to 15 years, for many of our communities, we won't be able to afford our infrastructure. The price of our utilities will be jacked so high, the price of our property taxes, just because we've got a smaller and smaller pool to pick from, that people will say, I'm paying more in my utilities and my property taxes than I am in my mortgage, right? So it is existential for us as a state to grow, and that means being more open to having new kinds of housing. This is controversial, right? I talk to a lot of mayors, and if you talk to them and say, what about like a nice high-end, trailer park? What about granny flats, right? I never heard of that until recently, where you can rent out your mother-in-law suite at the bottom of your house. Many townships don't allow that. In places like Boise, Idaho, they're allowing people to put a trailer on someone else's property, right? And do a hookup there. These are not, or tiny homes. There's a bunch of different things that other places are experimenting with. But if we don't take it as our mission, and this is why in the legislation that I've worked on, if you're a mayor and you're a city council and you are not pro-growth communities, meaning you're not adding housing units, then you're going to be at risk of losing your federal funding because you're not pro-growth enough. That's how much of an emergency it is on housing. It's like an ice storm, except it's a housing emergency, and we need to treat it as such.
And Laura, you were nodding your head as well.
Yeah, the thing that I would also add is the current state of housing. I can speak for Detroit, but this is true across the state. Like 90% of our housing, I'm making up the statistic, but it's a huge statistic, was built before 1960. The quality of our housing in the city of Detroit and across the state of Michigan is not going to get better just magically. We also have to invest in helping homeowners stay in their homes, get access to capital for home repairs. And in the city of Detroit, that's extremely difficult because a lot of times the amount of money that is required to get that home up to the level of livability is higher than the home value is worth, or it's such a large percentage of the home value that no reasonable resident would take that burden onto themselves. So I again, this kind of goes back to what I said at the beginning, like we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We desperately need all types of housing supply, and our current residents are not in high standard, high quality housing. Plus, we need to attract new residents. So that means the more housing supply, the better, whether that's home repairs, new housing supply, new construction. We have to have all of these levers pulled at the same time.
Well, and to Senator Slotkin's point, you talk about housing stock, but not having the people moving in. I've Zillowed my parents' very first house that I grew up in Royal Oak. They paid $80,000 for it. I Zillowed it maybe 2-3 months ago. It's closer to $200,000 now, and it looks exactly the same as it did when we moved out in the early 2000s. So to that note, as a young person who sees something like that, who might be discouraged about the housing market, and this is for any of you, I mean, what kind of message do you have?
I'm happy to start. I mean, I think this is, we've developed, again, out of sheer desperation, like a housing scorecard for communities, right? How do you know whether the community you live in is doing everything they can to actually encourage more housing? We all understand that we love our downtowns and we love them to be quaint, But when a developer has an option to put a apartment building downtown, but you don't like the look of it and it doesn't remind you of how it felt back when Grandpa was there, that might be on you, right? That might be on you. And if you decide, I'm sorry, and it doesn't have to be, and I get it, each community is gonna want different things, but you can't say no to everything. And I want people, we all know that at the city council meetings and at our local meetings, we always have our frequent flyers, right? We always have the local guy who shows up and he's got a different issue or maybe the same issue every single week. There should be housing conversations, and if one is not happening in your community as a young person, you should get yourself a scorecard and go to city council and be pushing on them. And it's hard, we know, like, trust me, being an elected leader is like less fun than it used to be, and it can be tough, but this is how you help your community, is by being a pro-housing community. So the message is are you living, if you're looking in Royal Oak or you're renting in Royal Oak, is Royal Oak doing everything that they can do to be a pro-housing community? And if not, start showing up and asking those questions. And I guarantee you that most of our communities are not calling anybody. They're not inviting developers in. They're not saying, hey, why don't we convene a community conversation on housing? They know it's a problem, but they're kind of waiting for someone else to fix it, and that's just not going to work.
We do on our website have a Get Housing Ready guide for local governments that gives you every single step of what you should be doing as a local government to be pro-housing. And we also had housing readiness grants that were provided by the state government a couple of years ago. And I am going to tell you, it was $6 million, I think, in total. It was $3 million. I think we got another $3 million. They went very quickly. Communities, I think, by the most part, want to do the right thing. Maybe not all the electeds on there, it's a little bit more difficult, but like city managers, township supervisors, those folks really do want to do the right thing, and they are looking at their zoning. We have a little bit of a capacity issue with actual consultants to help local governments get through rezoning and looking at their land use policy. I think there is more will out there than maybe we're giving the idea is. But I cannot let us leave this panel without saying we need more money. We need the federal and state government to put more money towards housing. Thank you. And we need it to be consistent. I cannot have money changing from year to year where we have developers that are counting on programs and developing a pipeline, doing the hard things, the persistent things that it takes to get housing done, and then have the government come and go, we're going to scrap that and start over and do something different, because it's discouraging and it leaves money at the table, it drives off the cost of development and sends big developers running to other states.
Did you have anything that you'd...
Amen. I agree.
Well, so we talk about, the roles of different people. You are in the philanthropic sort of space. What kind of role does philanthropy have to play to help maybe bridge those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I think philanthropy's got two real roles in this, maybe more, but two main ones. First, we have the privilege and responsibility of looking at things with the long view of the future. And that gives us an opportunity to think more in 10, 20 years instead of in political cycles, which is a real, that's a blessing for us. We need to push communities to be thinking in terms of 10, 20 years, maybe even longer when it comes to these big issues. We need to build the muscle, and we need to keep pushing to move that muscle over the course of multiple political cycles. And then the second piece that I would say is, I think that it's really important for us to be focused on the end user experience. You talked a little bit about your personal experience, right? Oftentimes I think nonprofits and philanthropic organizations, we have this goal of helping everyone, and it is a really important thing to do. But our nonprofit organizations can sometimes, and philanthropy enables this, can sometimes make it more complicated. Because now we've got 14 programs to try to help address one issue instead of working collaboratively and collectively towards some shared goals. And so I do think that it is philanthropy's core responsibility to really convene and bring people together and try to build those shared goals so that we are all rowing our boat in the same direction. But yeah, and that's what we really strive to do in Detroit for sure.
And so we talk about rowing all in the same direction. I would hate for this panel to sound too doomerist. So, who's doing it right? Who should we be looking to as a model for what we should be doing in Michigan? And Senator Slotkin, I'd like to start with you.
Well, look, I mean, I think there are, like I said, super creative things going on around the country for communities that already have a ton of people flowing in. Right? It's easy to be creative in Boise, Idaho, where you're like, holy moly, we're getting so many refugees from California. We don't know where to house them all. Let's think creatively about this. Or Denver or something like that. I think the places where I have seen interesting work going on, like I was just in Holland, and I think Holland has done some really interesting things to be pro-growth, and they own it, right? And they had employers coming in, they had more people than they had housing. And so they sat together, they're very collaborative there, and they said, how do we actually accommodate all these people and still keep our community looking the way it is? And they have put up some of those apartment buildings. They have put up, but they've also loosened some of their regulations. And that to me, and Holland, I mean, if anyone's been there, like besides the tulips, like they got a really cute little town there. And I think that to me is where I've seen it done really well. Parts of Grand Rapids as well are really, I think, doing interesting things.
One of the examples that we look to is Cleveland. Actually, I don't know if anyone's familiar, but they are working on a site readiness fund that's paired with a manufactured housing initiative. So they've both attracted a large-scale manufacturer that will produce 480 units a year, and they're doing site readiness prep, which I think is something, especially for Detroit, but I know for around the state as well, site prep is really expensive. It's a huge component of development costs that often get overlooked because you think, oh, there's so much vacant land, we'll just put up a bunch of houses, but you don't think about the subground infrastructure, the alleyways, the curb cuts, all the things that need to go into making that land ready to go. And so I think Cleveland has done a really good job of bringing people around the table. Jury's out on exactly how well it will go, but I do think that that's a model that we could really be looking to.
I think she's doing that to make us humiliated that we have to learn
Right.
something from Ohio.
I'm so sorry.
It's a challenge to all of us. We are not going to get beat by Cleveland.
I will say, I think,
but can I add, I'm sorry, one thing that I thank you for saying that. I shun myself for even bringing this up, but I do think that one of the core components, as we think about the creative new build, new construction opportunities, manufactured and factory built housing has come a long way.
Yes.
And when we think about supply and demand in manufactured and factory built, you have to think regional. You don't just think city by city. So if Cleveland has a great manufacturer that's going to produce 480 units a year, they're looking at regional demand, not just in the city of Cleveland. So how can we piggyback off of that? Or how can we compete with that to make Detroit or Flint or Grand Rapids or wherever the hub of the Midwest? We always like to say, Detroit put America on wheels. We should put America in homes. Like, let's, but we really have to think about our economic development incentives that are paired with the way we think about housing. Again, it's not just a housing problem, it's also an economic development problem.
yeah, no, I think that's right. I think what they're saying is key, right? Like, we are doing creative things in our state. There is no doubt. If you go to a big housing conference in the country, they will say Michigan is doing cool things. And people call us and try to learn from us all the time. Where we are most successful is where we partner. And I can tell you, when you look in communities that are doing it right, it is where they have the businesses, the local government, the educational systems, the hospitals, all coming together to look at their housing issues and work on it together. You will see a decrease in homelessness in those communities, an increase of housing development in those communities. It is about a community coming together, creating a plan, and working that plan. But if you're just a really good city manager, it's hard to do it by yourself. If you're a really good nonprofit, it's hard to do it by yourself. You really need people to come together and formulate a plan, support that plan, provide a vision. It's easier for us to invest when there is a vision and a plan. It's easier for philanthropy to invest. So we've seen some communities that are doing it really well. When you look at Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, Traverse City, in Detroit, really are spending time taking housing seriously and not just saying we're in a crisis and or an emergency, but doing something. It's easy to say we are. It's harder for everyone to come together, devote the time, the energy, and not just talk about it, but do something about it.
So it sounds like it comes down to partnerships, but what in your mind does an effective partnership really look like when the rubber meets the road?
For me, it's everybody talking and sharing a vision, really sharing a vision.
From the philanthropic angle, what does it look like to you?
Shared goals and a sort of ground wire into systems change. So it's not just an investment that's going to help 10 people. It's an investment that's going to somehow help us think differently about this system or this issue moving forward and bring other people to the table.
Yeah, I will just add, just as someone who visits all over the state, right, there's different vibes, right, in different communities, and you can tell who has a strategic plan on housing and who doesn't. And it's difficult because these things are controversial. No one says that they're easy. But if you walk into a community and whether you're elected, appointed, Democrat, Republican, there's a shared vision that they've worked out amongst themselves and you can slot in, it's pretty easy to tell kind of first 10 minutes of the conversation.
And so, we've talked a lot about more urban cities. We've talked a lot about bigger cities, but Michigan also has a large rural portion too. How do we make sure that we're not leaving our rural neighbors out of the housing conversation, and how do we maximize building for them as well?
Yeah, I mean, we have a regional housing partnership infrastructure in our state where we have 15 regional housing partnerships, and they are actually create a sub-plan of our statewide housing plan, and they're our main conduit to the state and the housing ecosystem for communication and understanding what their needs are, making sure our funding is meeting those regional needs. And a lot of them are all rural, right? Because we cover the entire state. So we make sure we hear their voices there. We also have set aside for rural funding. So we actually take the money we get from the state and put it in a formula based on need to make sure that each area is getting what they actually need, not just where the most capacity is to ask first. Because if we just did first come, first serve, it would only be the cities that have all the developers. But we really try to take the time to match our resources to where those needs are. We also work at creating capacity in the rural communities. We have a nonprofit called the Great Lakes Housing Services that provides free technical assistance to local governments and nonprofit housing developers so that if they don't have the capacity to access our funding or figure out even what they need for housing, they can get some free support in helping them get there.
And so, we talked a minute ago about partnerships between like philanthropies, and we talked about the different community organizations, but I guess, is there any disconnect between the state and the federal government in terms of how we could be maximizing a better partnership here to grow housing?
I mean, if you haven't noticed, we're not doing real well in Washington right now. It's not a healthy environment. And that is, this is what the state is feeling, this like, we're going to change policy this way. No, we don't like that. We're going to change it back. No, we're seeing that on housing policy. We're seeing that on manufacturing policy. We're seeing it on a ton of things where, what we need is stability, and what the climate is producing in Washington is instability. That's just at a kind of a top line level. And so I don't think it's like we should be working better together. It's like I can't finagle the programs back into where they were 3 years ago or 2 years ago because that's just, they've been yanked in a different direction for largely political reasons, right? And I can insert topic X on that. I think the thing that we can do is at least have a shared vision of what we're trying to do in the state, just like we're asking local governments to do, like have your shared vision among your collaborators here. We need to do the same thing. We see each other, we talk about these things. But at the end of the day, we also need resources. We need funding into the pots of money that do help our state the most. The federal government is shifting its priorities. Money is going into other accounts right now, not so much on housing. It's why I'm actually glad we're doing a housing bill out of sheer desperation. It won't revolutionize anything, but I think it's positive overall. But no, I think this is, if you want to understand the consequences of this like pendulum swing back and forth, this nausea-inducing pendulum that we're on, it's stuff like housing funding in Michigan, in your community that you care about. It has a direct correlation between Washington and your local community.
So I just have to say, it just dawned on me when you were speaking that when I was criticizing the stability of housing programs, you thought I was talking about the federal government. But I was really talking about the state. I'm bold, but not bold enough to criticize the federal government next to a senator. But
it's okay. It's really okay.
But I think that is true. Like as a state, having that vision that we can share with the federal government, making sure that our state funding doesn't overlap and pay for what the federal government already pays for, but augments that and really picks up the gaps and leverages the federal resources. So like when there's legislation right now for state LIHTC, a state low-income housing tax credit. That would be amazing because that state funding really leverages more federal funding and allows us to do probably 2,500 additional units of housing every year. That's smart investment. Our little bit of money from the state gets a lot more money from the federal government. That's where we need to align. We need to have our state funding also fund things the federal government doesn't. The federal government does not fund housing really primarily for folks over 80% of AMI. And that's okay. There's a lot of people 80% and below that need that assistance. But we need that state money to be a little bit more flexible because we know that people at 100% AMI cannot afford a home. They can't afford the rents and they can't afford a mortgage today. So if you want to talk about alignment, that's what we need to focus on, right? Is really making sure that our funds are meeting everyone's needs in our state and are not duplicative, but enhance each other's investment.
I mean, I guess if I could, as a follow-up, you talked a moment ago about funding coming, going. I mean, what is the possible solution there? What can anyone do? Because it seems like it might just be the whims of a few lawmakers or a few congressional members or, the whims of the day.
Can't wait to hear. They could just be consistent with our funding, right? Like what we have asked for, we get $50 million a year in the housing community development from the state. Super, super thankful. We are able to do a lot of awesome things with that across the state. What happens is every year there is a tug about, well, nope, let's make that more restrictive. Instead of doing what we're already doing with it, let's take it now this year and earmark it for other programs. We could just be consistent. Our lawmakers could just say, here's your $50 million. Let's use it in the best possible way because the environment for housing changes every year. What we need this year isn't the same as what we needed 5 years ago, right? And because we also need to play with the federal government and what they're choosing to fund and not fund every year, right? And unfortunately, people just don't allow us to have that predictability. And it is very frustrating. If you can't tell, I am exhausted by it, quite honestly. We work really hard to develop programs that we know are impactful, that work hand in hand with the local government, augment and leverage federal government money. And every year we have to just fight for that $50 million to stay the same.
And so, again, talking about the disconnect between state and federal, from a more local level to state, I mean, what does potentially a partnership there look like, especially, while involving philanthropy?
Yeah, well, I think that the pressures on the local government are different than the pressures on the state and federal government, right? We touched on it a little bit, but your local elected official is getting a lot of pushback when it comes to the not in my backyard contingent of folks, the people, primarily homeowners who are already in a city who are now protected because they own a piece of the land. They are now protected, and they are able to more vocally say what they do and don't want in their area. And I do feel very strongly that there should be some local control over some of these things. That's what the zoning code is for, right? That's why we have a zoning code. But I do think that there can also be more alignment around the types of outcomes that we are investing toward. So if we value housing production, we need to invest philanthropically and at the state level based on success with housing production. And that sometimes means changing the incentive structure for some of the funding that we do philanthropically, and I won't presume to speak on behalf of the state, but I think all funding sources need to start to align around the same goals and outcomes, and the more we can align towards those outcomes, the more we're gonna see it, right? Measure what matters, you get what you measure. We all know these little quips. It's very important that we align in that way.
Well, and I feel like something that we've talked about several times today is the building of manufactured or mobile home housing. But we're also seeing some pushback to that. If that is something that Michigan can use to expand its housing stock, why are we seeing such distaste towards it?
Lack of exposure to the product. Yeah. That's the only. I mean, when you look at some of our factory-built housing, is actually higher quality than stick-built in a lot of different ways. So I think people it has a negative connotation. They haven't been in really good, high-quality factory-built housing yet. But I think, and I'm sure you have, as you see some of this product, it's beautiful, it's energy efficient, it's got more resilient types of material in than our average stick-built home. I can't imagine it's going anywhere but going to have growth in the future, and people should learn more about it.
I agree. We were able to do a manufactured housing showcase in the city of Detroit. Some of you may have been able to visit. If you haven't, come on out. It's in North Corktown. The product is absolutely beautiful, and we specifically wanted to do this as a showcase. Typically, philanthropic organizations are not responsible for building and developing housing, but we wanted to do this as a showcase with our partners and with the North Corktown Neighborhood Association to be able to show people, literally, that this product is beautiful and that it fits really nicely with the vibe of the neighborhood. And so I think more exposure is really necessary. And the other thing is, because people are a little bit skeptical of these products, I think that we haven't invested enough in innovation, and therefore sometimes the economics of the product doesn't always work. And so I think we need to invest more into this type of innovation in order to really see it at scale.
Yeah, it's not cheaper yet.
No,
it's not cheaper.
It's not cheaper, but it has the potential to be.
Yes.
And the amount that we're investing into that just pales in comparison with the amount that we're continuing to invest in traditional construction methods, which are not getting better, right? They're also not solving the problem. So we need more shots on goal to make this change really possible.
I guess then, that brings it to a great point, which is if we are seeing things that we know could work, but we are seeing barriers to entry, I guess, what is something that is scalable that, in the next several years, you think that Michigan should be putting its focus towards? And we can start with you.
Okay, what is something that is scalable that Michigan should be focused on? Well, I think that we need to focus on I would love to see us pivot our focus to more perfecting the zoning code such a way that we feel confident every time someone comes up with a product. If the project meets the zoning code, then we should be able to move forward with it. I would love to see more energy focused in that space, because that is where a lot of times we're just seeing at the local levels, the project just never gets off the ground.
I'm going to pivot to something different, and I'm going to say what I hope that we get done in the next 5 years is create sustainable programs that are not reliant on appropriations from the state or federal government. And I'm just going to give you a couple examples. One, in our state, we are very lucky to have a housing tax increment financing program. It's lovely. We've passed over 60 TIF plans, developed over, I think, close to 6,000 units of housing. It is a predictable program that is not reliant on any appropriation. So it's just going to keep going, and it doesn't run out. Developers love that kind of consistency. I'd also love, as I mentioned, to create that 40% down DPA, and I think if I can get enough money, and love to partner with philanthropy to get it going over the next few years, that will, in a sense, keep funding itself going on. We also have a multifamily development program called the Michigan Housing Accelerator Fund, which helps provide funding for the development of mixed income multifamily development. We are just starting that now, but I think if we can get enough investment in that program, that will continue to feed itself and go on without the reliance on money from the legislators, which I think is important. Not that we're not going to continue to need money from the legislators, but we will have some things that are just investments, so they'll continue to turn over and will create some stability in our housing ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, because I don't control the levers on housing, to me, if every local community had a coordinated housing strategic plan, I think that would, no matter what it looked like and how interesting it was, at least there'd be a coordinated plan. And then at the federal level, I am willing to say, like, if you're not growing, then why should we be putting tons of federal money into your new sewer, your new road, your new bridge, your new tunnel, because you're not doing your part to grow your community? So I definitely think there's some play there. And then we have to do something so that when communities get popular, we can have the people who work to keep that city running actually able to live there. Teachers, police officers, firefighters, the folks who work at the post office. If you are working at the library, if you are part of what keeps a town alive, you should be able to live in that town. And there are places that have long dealt with this problem, places like Boston, where they couldn't have any cops live in the city. They couldn't afford to live in the city. That doesn't work for the kinds of communities we have here. You lose people. You lose superintendents if they can't live within 50 minutes of the school. So there's got to be housing policy, I think, at the local level that supports local folks being able to live in the town they service.
Well, I actually do want to pivot to questions a little bit early because we got quite a few of them in from the audience, and most of them all of them, frankly, are quite good. And so I'll just start with the one on the top here, which doesn't have a name on it, but it says, how do we prevent private equity from punching up, residential properties and raising rents?
Yeah, so this became a very hot topic when President Trump kind of took this on as his housing plan. I have to say, I'm not necessarily against that idea. There was this concern that folks from Wall Street were buying up property and either holding onto them or flipping them, and they weren't local landlords. It was jacking up prices, the whole thing. I can't speak exactly for Michigan, but nationwide, it's about 2% of all rental properties is owned by Wall Street. So I don't want to overstate the problem, but it became a very easy target. And the president hadn't done any real housing plan, and so he picked up this idea of going after private equity. I don't have a problem with it, but it doesn't change the amount of supply of housing. It changes who owns the housing. It's like rearranging the decks, the chairs on the deck, but it's not adding chairs to the deck, of the boat. So for me, I'm not. And Michigan, we can hear exactly how deep the problem is, but I gotta say, I'm more interested in solutions that add supply than just kind of going after who owns what, though I don't have a big problem going after private equity on that.
I agree. It's not a huge problem in our state, actually. And I think there is also room for local involvement, right? Like if you have good code enforcement, if you're doing what you need to do as a city, then you can kind of be on top of that, at least from a bad landlord policy. Now from driving up the cost of housing, I think there is room for private equity. You know, if they want to come and co-invest with MSHDA, I will take their money. And I think if they are partnering, whether it's through opportunity zones or with our Michigan Housing Accelerator Fund, we can put their money to good use.
So it says one way to lower the cost to housing is proximity to transit. Creates access, more options of mobility, affordability, livability for people and communities. How do you see the state supporting integration? I believe, lost the word.
What does that mean?
Integration of I suppose, how do we see housing and transportation sort of come together in that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it comes with parking requirements. If you're in a community that has really good transit, I think we at MSHDA, you know, are relying on locals to not require a ton of parking if not everyone's going to need a car.
That's a big one, by the way. I didn't realize how big of a deal. The requirement that each new building that's built in downtown Holland or whatever has a certain number of parking spaces. That's almost impossible for some communities to make that much parking available. And so waiving that, again, a local decision to waive that allows these buildings to be built, and people want to live there without a car or only one car and not two or whatever it is. And I think it's amazing to me how some of these small changes can actually allow a lot more of that housing, developer housing, that we need.
Yeah, parking is a huge issue.
Laura, you're close to Detroit. I mean, I guess that would be a great question for you as well.
Yeah, well, one of the things anecdotally that we can say is we've invested heavily in the Joe Louis Greenway, which is a 27-mile greenway around the city of Detroit. And there are a few places along the greenway where residential housing backs up directly. And one of the things we wanted to make sure was that as much as possible, local residents were able to stay and benefit from the Joe Louis Greenway. Now, it's not exactly transportation, but it's a connection point, right? This loop allows people to better connect with job opportunities, with community, with downtown Detroit. And we've already seen prices within those residential areas go up by 3 times. They went from roughly $50,000 to now they're over $150,000 on average. So we know that there is a really strong correlation, in this case green space, with residential housing, but also transportation. And I think that it just speaks to what we're saying, which is we really need more supply along these nodes of connection.
I mean, a family only has so much money, right? So if they live near transportation, they can spend more on their housing. If they don't need 2 cars, they only need 1. Yeah. The federal government did have some money at the Department of Transportation for housing to be developed near transit areas. But they made it so difficult and so restrictive that no matter how we tried to get that money, it was like, well, it doesn't qualify for that. I'm like, well, we got a port here. Well, it doesn't qualify. So it is one of the things that the senator's saying, how do we remove those barriers to accessing the money that's there so that we can meet the goals of that program in the first place?
I believe it was mentioned by you, Laura, earlier about the aging housing stock that Michigan has. And somebody asks here, preserving existing housing can assist with housing supply. How can we make the delivery of homeowner rehab financing more effective and efficient?
Create capacity in all of our areas to actually manage homeowner repair programs. It is needed. MSHDA funds a lot of homeowner repair through our My Neighborhood program. We also did through our My Hope program. The issue really is that it's hard to deliver it consistently across the state because there's not capacity to operate those very labor-intensive programs equally across the state. We also need to work together to layer state programs, and all of them are funded by the federal government, so thank you. But there's money that comes in from the Department of Energy. There's money that comes in from HUD, all working to rehab existing homeowner units. It's hard for us to layer them but we're continuing to try to work at that to allow those folks that are operating those programs an easier time to access money from the state.
Just to put a really fine point on it, we in Detroit have demolished tens of thousands of units, right? And that's taking supply away, and we need to prevent. We talk a lot about we can't build on a foundation of quicksand. So it is critically important that we help people be able to stay in their homes and that we ensure that those homes are not decreasing in quality. We rolled out the Detroit Home Repair Fund back in 2022, and we got 250,000 phone calls within the first week. So this tells you how pertinent this issue is. It's really deeply felt by people, especially in the city of Detroit, but across the state of Michigan.
Yeah. Senator Slotkin, this question was specifically for you. What are the issues that concern you about reconciling the House and Senate versions of the housing bill?
Yeah, and actually the biggest stumbling block, or biggest difference, I should say, was if private equity buys housing stock, they can only hold on to it for, I think it was 7 years. In the version that the Senate passed, and then the House didn't like that. And so there's been a debate, and that will have to be worked out for sure. To me, like, given the breadth of this bill, that's a solvable problem, right? One way or another, I have frequently vote for imperfect bills, and it's important enough, housing is important enough that I think we'll get there, and we'll get there certainly before the end of the year, if not sooner. But I think the bill itself is kind of like, does a lot of very small things. And cumulatively, that is good. But they're so wonky, like Mishta will understand what they are, but the average person will be like, what'd you do to my, like, where's the housing? You passed the first housing bill, where's the housing? Right. And as you can imagine, where we can get consensus today is on sort of small changes to existing programs rather than radical change. I think that if it's important, I know, see, like the wonky person is like, this is important stuff. It is. I think the truth is, if the president had come in, regardless of whether you voted for him or not, and he had said, I have a big, bold plan on housing, and here's what it is, and I want to get people on board, I think he actually could have done it if it was a reasonable plan. But that's just not where, we haven't had that coming from the White House. So this is a bill kind of made by legislators and therefore a bit more wonky.
Gotcha. And this one might be more for Director Hovey. What are we doing to share with our young adults and college students the programs that do exist to help for those who only do make about $20,000 to $30,000 a year?
Probably not enough. We actually have been working on that issue at Mishta. We have a new firm that we're working with, and we started an Instagram account to try to get to where the young people are getting their news and their information. Working on trying to work with our regional housing partnerships, because they know how to communicate best with the folks in their region and the young folks. We do know that they get their news differently, than probably our older generation. But we are, the governor did an executive order. I don't know if anyone remembers. She did an executive order about reaching out to younger folks, especially where housing is concerned. And so we have been working at trying to do just that.
Gotcha. Can I also add, I think this is a really important point of connection, where it's not just about housing. We also have an income problem. Yeah. And we need to, as a state, be thinking about economic development and pulling in employers that are going to be paying a fair wage for decent work.
So with the very short amount of time we have left, lightning round, the people who leave here today, what is one actionable thing that they could do to help address the housing crisis in their own neighborhoods?
Get involved and stay involved.
It's demand a strategic housing plan from your local leaders.
Yeah, keep putting pressure on the local leaders to fight back against NIMBYism and +1 to the housing strategic plan and investments in the zoning code.
Well, unfortunately, we can't solve the housing crisis today, but we will put a pin in it. And thank you all so very much for being up here today. Let's give them a big round of applause. And thank you.
for attending.
Distinguished guests, welcome to the 2026 Detroit Regional Chamber Mackinac Policy Conference. This session, Michigan's House is on Fire, is sponsored by Business Leaders for Michigan. Please welcome the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Detroit Regional Chamber, Sandy Barua, and the President and Chief Executive Officer of Henry Ford Health and Chair of the 2026 Mackinac Policy Conference, Bob Riney.
I think those whistles are for me because I've lost some weight, but
we'll go with it.
All right, welcome everyone. First of all, welcome and thank you for being flexible. As you know, we are trying a whole bunch of new things with our agenda this year. And starting on Tuesday, since, well, frankly, you're all here anyway, we have tried that, and I think it's going to work out just great. So we've got a great, frankly, hard-hitting opening session here on Tuesday, and we'll do another welcome in the morning with our governor, Gretchen Whitmer. But Bob, let's jump right into this. Common ground. How do we find common ground while our house is on fire? And this is your theme. It's a brilliant theme. Talk to us about how you came up with it and why you came up with it.
Well, first of all, good afternoon, everybody. It's really great to be with all of you and open this conference with Sandy. But, you know, I was honored to be asked to chair the conference, and I did some reflection on the times that we find ourselves in. And, you know, I said to Sandy, if I'm going to chair, we're going to have a hard-hitting discussion about the state of this state that we all love. And he said, absolutely, let's do it. And I chose the theme because we're going to show you some data that shows that we're in serious trouble. And it's not serious trouble that has been happening over the last 3 years. In many cases, we're on a 25 year negative trajectory. And so this is not the happy part of the conference. This is going to be recognize and own we have a problem part of the conference. And there are solutions. There are solutions that have been tried, proven, and tested. But we're at a point where if we lose further relevancy in some of our key metrics, we're not going to be able to have the kind of conversations and have the national influence that we've had for so long. And this is coming from a natural optimist, someone that always believes that the glass is half full and that there's always a way. But you don't ever solve a problem by failing to recognize that you have one. And so that's really what this is focused on at the beginning. You know, more of this later, and we'll get into it, but prepared to get a little uncomfortable and know that that's okay. That's the first step to us finding a quest for common ground and moving forward.
Yeah, when, you know, Bob, when you decided to take on the gig as conference chair, I was just delighted because, you know, the Detroit Regional Chamber for over a year and a half now has been really focused on this House is on Fire theme. I mean, our Detroit Policy Conference, which was held earlier in the year, was focused on this. Our polling with the Glenn Gariff group has been focused on this, and we've been kind of trying to do our best to hammer away with it. And other business groups are also ringing the alarm bell. I want to, you know, call out our friends at Business Leaders for Michigan. You know, they're a great partner in ringing the alarm bell that we've got to find a way to do better, and we're going to talk about that. But before we do that, Bob, we've done so many new things with this conference, format and all that, but so much of this are your ideas. So why don't you talk about what's in store for folks today?
Well, the weather was my idea, so let's just let's just start there.
Yeah, he'll take credit for anything.
No, I think, look, I've been, shamelessly, I've been coming to this conference like many of you for a very long time, and it's an amazing conference. Everything has a shelf life. Everything has to evolve. And so I would anticipate that next year's conference will evolve based on the learnings of this year's. But we wanted to do a few things. One is we wanted to change the structure and just acknowledge that an important part of people investing to come up here is meetings within the meetings. There's a lot of important meetings that take place, and so we structured some time for those meetings so that when we have the sessions, they can be well attended like we have today. And second is the tone. Common ground does not mean all thinking alike. Far from it. Common ground is about how we reach collaboration, how we reach a point of action versus paralysis. And that's about tone. And so you're going to hear a lot of speakers that are provocative, but you're going to hear speakers that ultimately live by examples of reaching common ground, about looking for ultimately what's in the best interest of the whole versus the best interest of the part, and common purpose. And then finally, there's a lot of people that come up here that didn't grow up in leadership like a lot of us a little long in the tooth did. And they come to this conference and they're looking for something different. They're looking for connections. They're looking for relationships. They're looking for potential mentors to help them. And they're looking to have their ideas, you know, sort of challenged, broadened in their own thinking. And the best way to do that is to create some social activities and some networking activities that allow people. I mean, who doesn't love meeting people in rotating euchre games? Come on. I mean, it's a great way to just make a connection with somebody. So we hope that you take advantage of the games. And just, you know, a little commercial. If you do injure yourself in pickleball, wait until you get downstate for care. I have a referral for you.
So when we talk about common ground, hopefully you'll see in how you know, Bob's team and our team really work to kind of curate the agenda. You know, we're going to have conservative speakers, we're going to have liberal speakers, Democrats and Republicans, people who are unaffiliated, but we tried to kind of not pair them, but make sure that you had the opportunity to hear people that actually get along even though they have different perspectives. And I want to start with former Vice President Mike Pence and former Secretary Pete Buttigieg. These two gentlemen know each other well, and they get along. Now, they don't agree on political issues, at least all the time, but many of them that they do. And what we want you to do throughout this conference is just don't go to the sessions that are going to echo back what your political viewpoint is. If you're a liberal or a left-leaning person, definitely go listen to Mike Pence. I'll bet you anything he's going to say at least a handful of things that you're going to say, well, I can respect that, or I understand that, or, well, I learned something different. And the same thing, the opposite, with a Pete Buttigieg. When we think about people finding common ground, let's look at our governor and our Speaker of the House. Couldn't think of two more different personalities, two more different political perspectives, but look what they've been able to do. They collaborated, they found common ground on Selfridge Air Base, on road funding, on disaster relief, and on passing budgets on time. So listen, even though you may come from a different perspective, to something that might be insightful.
We're going to have a session that features together former U.S. Senator John Tester from Montana, a West state, and former Governor Sununu from New Hampshire, a East state, again, a Republican and a Democrat, but they've been on the road demonstrating to the country how you work together for common ground. And so listen, learn, and observe, and find the intersects of their ideas and their approaches. We're also going to have a senatorial debate. We'll have a Democratic debate between Abdul El Sayed, Mallory McMarrow, and Haley Stevens. And then we'll have a separate session with Mike Rogers because he's running unopposed as the Republican candidate. This is a really important midterm for this state, and the eyes are on Michigan. So, I hope you'll join me in listening for ideas, not complaints. And then I'm really excited about this special guest. I mean, who doesn't love Captain Dan?
Lieutenant Dan.
Lieutenant Dan.
Well, it's been a while. Maybe he got promoted.
Yeah. Well, you know who was Forrest Gump in the movie. But in all seriousness, I love people that choose, after having a lot of success, to demonstrate their values in a meaningful way. And his focus on patriotism and taking care of our vets is something that he just does with incredible passion and energy. And you're not going to hear anything from him about an R or a D. You're going to hear about his desires and his hopes for America. Now let's pivot. And this PowerPoint is an important statement. We're going to tell you all the reasons we're in trouble, but this is a state worth fighting for. And I'm going to make it personal. My family, everyone's got their stories. My family migrated from Ireland to Kentucky and from Kentucky to Detroit. And I have been grateful my whole life that we landed in Michigan and I got to be a part of this amazing state. I've always loved the state for its natural resources. I've loved it for its history in innovation, its history in the Industrial Revolution, its history in music, its history in so many things. I've loved it for the amazing Great Lakes that we have, and I've loved it for the authenticity of people that are Michiganders. And we recruit people all the time from all over the country for Henry Ford Health, and the one thing they say, whether they're here 1 year, 2 years, 30 years, is they'll say, I've never been in a state that just has more down-to-earth, authentic people. Not the bless your heart people, the really authentic people. And when people ask how you're doing, they want to know. And when they say, what up, doe, I just did that so I could be cool with what up, doe. But the reality is, this is a state worth fighting for. But let's make no mistake, we're in a fight. And it's a fight that if we don't see it as a fight, we're not even going to have a chance to win.
So let's start with the base that we have to build on. And we have a lot in this great state. Some of the nation's biggest challenges, especially around affordability, are actually a great strength of our state. I mean, we have affordable, terrific housing in this state. We have an affordable and high quality of life. We have a high homeownership rate, which shows that we're building equity in our lives. And we are great when it comes to climate resiliency, energy availability, and of course, our Great Lakes water resources. We also have an innovation ecosystem that, yes, we need to do more on, but again, we're building from strength. We have 4 R1 universities in this state, an incredible advantage. Other states would kill to have that. And we have an incredible concentration of highly skilled, highly educated engineers in this state. These are all incredible innovation assets.
One challenge we have with those amazing assets is the chronic cycle of challenges with the governance models. So that's another thing that we have to think long and hard about, because there's only so much energy we can spend, and if we're spending it in cycling through dysfunctionality, well-intended, but one time after another, it seems like we rotate through universities, we're not going to prosper as a state, and we're not going to leverage the talent of these amazing universities that we're fortunate to have.
Yeah, and sticking with the innovation theme, we're 5th in the country for business-led research and development. We are 6th in the nation in business startups, and we're 12th in the nation on venture capital growth. And just a decade ago, Michigan was in the bottom 20 when it came to venture capital growth. So this is...
The foundation and the core is here.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we just talked about, this is such a great place to live. I mean, just look at where we are right now on beautiful Mackinac Island. How many places have a place like this? But the natural beauty across this state is really stunning. And I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. And so I'm pretty much a snob when it comes to natural beauty, but this place is beautiful. And look what's happening in cities around the state, right? Look what's been happening in Grand Rapids over the last 20 years. Look what's been happening in Detroit over the last 10. Look what's happening in places like Kalamazoo, Traverse City, and others. It is a great place to be.
But, as the headline said, our house is on fire. Let's take a look.
Our house is on fire, and you know, there was a column written not just in the last couple of days. It said, you know, we're here to pat ourselves on the back. This might be someone who hasn't been here for a while, but we're not going to do that.
So since I live in a health system, I thought I would put this in the story that I could personally relate to. Our state is an older patient. It's got good genes, but it's facing some complex health issues. The challenge is that the patient's in denial. And it's getting whipsawed by one specialist telling it one diagnosis and a potential fix, and another specialist taking over care, changing its meds, and telling it that this is the approach. We need what we practice in healthcare, a multidisciplinary, coordinated team approach to solving vexing issues. The house is on fire. We have fire trucks, but they're going in opposite directions. And therein lies our challenge, and therein lies our opportunity, and therein lies our imperative.
So let's look at our medical chart that sits at the foot of our bed. Just since the year 2000, a generation, in per capita income, this state has fallen from 18th to 40th. Now, all the stats that we're going to read off date back to the year 2000, 25 years. Over that period of time, we've had Democratic governors and Republican governors. We've had Republican legislatures and Democratic legislatures. We've had trifectas of a mix of all of those three elements controlling our executive branch and our two branches in the Capitol. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is a Michigan issue. And if anyone thinks that it is a Democrat issue or a Republican issue, not only is that wrong, it's also supremely unhelpful as we as a state, especially those of us in the business community, are striving hard to find common ground to reverse these numbers, because these numbers are not pretty. Let's look at the unemployment rate. 25 years ago, we were 21st in the country. Today, we're 46th. Labor force participation, we've gone from 21st to 39th.
This one is really startling when it comes to population growth. How many of you grew up with the business adage that if you're not growing, you're dying? Most of us, right? Growth is key to so much. I'll even talk about healthcare affordability. There's a lot of views right now on healthcare affordability. I haven't heard one talk about growing the population so we have a better bell-shaped curve of young people. We can work, and we will work as a healthcare industry with our partners in insurance to continue to get more efficient. But none of that will overcome the trajectory of a population getting older and older from a demographic standpoint. So if we want to talk affordability, let's connect it to population growth. We want to talk about education, let's connect it to population growth. And we've fallen to the bottom in GDP growth, 50 out of 50. Pretty sobering. So we have a we problem. And if we put it into traditional buckets so that we can feel better if we're not a part of that bucket, we're not going to solve the issue. It's just that simple. And we have fallen to the bottom in job growth. I'll give you an example of one of the challenges that's not ill-intended. This is not about bad folks, but we suffer from a real challenge with getting businesses attracted to our region and to our state, because if you look through history, our economic development policies have whipsawed. They've changed drastically every 8 years, every 6 years, and the minute they're implemented, they're vilified by a certain group. Say what you want about that, but you know what business wants? Business wants predictability. Business wants certainty when they're making long-term investments. Contrast that to our neighbor to the south, Ohio. Ohio. That was for you, Dennis. That was for you, Dennis. Ohio. They have a 30-year economic development funding source through a liquor tax. I'm not talking about liquor tax the answer. I'm simply saying if you're a business and you're looking for predictability and you have a 30-year runway, where are you going to pay attention? So job growth is connected very much to our policies and, more important, sustainability of policies for a longer period of time. And we also have to get out of the scarcity mentality. We have to get some fire in our belly. Celebrating a victory if something from the east side of the state moves to the west side of the state, or the west side of the state moves to the east side of the state, that might be okay for the company, but it's a net zero-sum game for the state. We got to think much, much bigger at what we declare as victories.
So back to our medical chart. 4th grade math, we were 10th 25 years ago. We're 34th today. 4th grade reading, we were 16th in the year 2000. We're 44th today.
And you're all going to need Bob-A-Ritas after this. They're serving special margaritas in the cafe. But we fall into the bottom 33rd in populations with a college degree. And the reason that's important is all the research, everything. It's directly related to income achievement. It's indisputable. So we want to elevate the economic stature. We've got to elevate the importance of academics. And last but not least, we fall into the bottom 49th in student-to-school counselor ratios. So catching those kids at their vulnerable moments and making sure that they commit, they connect, and they continue. And this is another one, this is real personal. This is about our children and our grandchildren, and ensuring that they have the same experience in this incredible state that we had. And then, I said last, but sorry, one more. We fall into 37th in chronic student absenteeism, and absenteeism is a really, really obviously determinant on how successful young people are going to be. And does anyone know what the number one barrier for absenteeism is by all research? Transportation. We live in the country's largest mobility enterprise ever. We have 25 mobility countries, including 3 of the biggest in the world, and they're all committed, by the way. If anyone should be able to create a role model solution for transportation, for education, it should be us.
So that's a lot of bad news, and here's some more.
We didn't say it was happy hour.
So we just walked through some of the major metrics in where Michigan is really struggling and has fallen precipitously over the last generation. But what's equally concerning is when you ask our Michiganian neighbors across the state, and we have done exactly that with our statewide polling with the Glenn Gariff Group, we asked our neighbors across the state, well, where do you think Michigan actually stands on some of these key issues? And here's some samples of what the results were. Percentage with a college degree, we just said it was 33rd. Voters think we're dead average. In fact, voters think we're about dead average in most of these critical rankings. When truth be told, we're not dead average, we're pretty much dead last. And why is this important? Because it's going to be hard to mobilize our political establishment, the people in, who work for the taxpayers, to make fundamental change if our voters aren't demanding it, because they don't see the problem the way the people in this room see the problem. It's hard to solve a problem if you don't think you have one, or if you are, an elected official, no one's asking you to solve the problem, because the solutions, and there are solutions, aren't necessarily easy. And finally, since when is it okay for this state to be just average? So we are laying out the case that the house is on fire, but we're pairing that with, well, WTF. Now, obviously, we're being a little cheeky here. House is on fire, WTF, but obviously WTF, as you just saw, stands for what's the fix? And what our strategy here is, yeah, let's not shy away from where we really stand and the kinds of challenges that we have, but as Bob said, solutions are available. So we have curated discussions throughout this entire conference focused on what's the fix, bringing people together, left and right, different perspectives, different industries, to focus on what are the solutions, what are the potential solutions that can do something important.
You know, as we talk about WTF, I think it's important to keep in mind that some of these statistics, which can be really sobering, some of them don't have to have long runways to course correct. You're going to see examples of other states that have made rapid cycle improvements. And it ultimately starts with culture. You know, all of us in business say, you know, the old adage, culture eats strategy for lunch. So we have a great culture in this state, but we do have to help change the conversations that are going on at kitchen tables about what it's going to take to move forward. And that requires being frank, but also aspirational and providing people with hope. So as you go through this conference, keep these jarring statistics in your mind, but keep in mind that we collectively, with a state that we love, can make a huge impact on all of this. 15 years ago, the state of Tennessee as being an economic power wasn't even in the conversation. It wasn't in anybody's conversation. And there's examples of that. But it was will, determination, and strategy, policy strategy, that got that. Henry Ford Health, with our partners, are making a $3 billion investment in this state. And I could go around the room and look at people that are making huge investments. Ford Motor Company, I was just there and saw their new headquarters in Dearborn. Phenomenal facility. I saw Rachel White, you know, Gardner White, Rachel Stewart, Gardner White making an incredible, you know, investment in all different areas. And I could go on and on and on. I mean, there's a lot of us that are placing big bets, but we have to collectively get the enterprise to not nostalgically look in the rearview mirror, but get focused and exciting about looking in the front mirror. And I think that there's a lot of talk about purple states, and we're one of only 3 purple states. I've always actually liked the fact that we're a purple state, because it provides, you can't phone anything in. You got to be, you know, really, really on your toes, because you have such division of how ideology goes. But right now, we're not wearing the color purple very well. These stats clearly show that to be a challenge, and we have to find a way to overcome that as well.
And if you forget those stats, you can go to a new website that the Chamber has created called, well, thehousesonfire.com. And all these numbers reside there. And when we think about what's the fix, what's super important is what's the fix long term that can be a strategy that will stand the test of time between Democrat or Republican control of any particular body. Because the Michigan U shouldn't be just the Michigan U is more than just a traffic pattern here in our state. It's actually our policy prescription. We do something for a while, and then we flip around and we do something else. And that is no way to run a state.
So as you leave these 3 days, remember one thing. This is a state worth fighting for, and it's a state worth winning.
And finally, to help us with What's the Fix? We are delighted that our dear friend Devin Skillion is back at the conference. He has been so instrumental in helping us curate many of these What's the Fix discussions, and I'm delighted that Devin Skillion is going to be on this stage in just a minute. Thanks so much, folks. We'll see you soon.
The next session is a Mackinac Moment, sponsored by Business Leaders for Michigan. Please welcome journalist and author, Devin Skillion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Did Bob Riney just say, "What up, doe"? I'm really glad I was here to hear that. Thank you all very much for being here for my Mackinac Moment. I have always loved the quote that was so often attributed to Winston Churchill, that a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth gets its pants on. Unfortunately, there is no real proof that Churchill actually authored that quip, which is ironic, that this well-worn adage about truth might not be all that based in truth. But I do know that even before that, going back to 1710, Jonathan Swift said something along the lines of, "Falsehood flies and the truth comes limping after it." We can go further than that. There's nothing new about the struggle for truth. I mean, good heavens, one of the most indelible, enduring images from the field of philosophy is that of Diogenes, 400 BC, walking the streets of Athens with a lantern, looking for one honest man. He didn't find one, by the way. Spoiler alert. But I had always believed that we were all Diogenes, passionate about finding the truth about just about everything. Questions enormously profound, like how big is our universe? How small is our place in it? To questions of considerably less import. Did my dog eat that cookie off my plate? I got to go check the ring cam because I need the truth. Truth seekers. I thought that's what really all of us were. And I really think that that was especially true of those of us who entered the field of journalism. When I started at the William Allen White School of Journalism at the University of Kansas, one of the first things that I was taught was that while any reporter's work is, of course, going to be held up to all kinds of scrutiny, the one thing that would protect me throughout my, what turned out to be 40 years in journalism, was the truth. Truth and accuracy had to be my North Star, my lighthouse. So just about every reporter that I know, certainly every reporter worth his or her notebook, develops this deep, relentless obsession with being accurate, with knowing the truth. In my 40 years of journalism, it wasn't rare at all for me to sit bolt upright in bed at 2 o'clock in the morning saying, did I say 1967 or 1968? And that would launch a crisis that would last until I either found out that I was right, I got it right, or that I could go fix it and correct the record. Terribly important to me. But it's not just journalists who have to rely on truth. Society, we all have to rely on certain truths. These discussions that we're going to have over the next couple of days, based on what's the fix, we have to be agreeing on the truths that have driven us there. Or else, what kind of debate do we have? It's a pretty worthless debate if one side keeps insisting that 2 and 2 are 5. So it has been heartbreaking for me that even as we have all now been able to create access to the world's libraries, dictionaries, encyclopedias, and almanacs, all at our fingertips on a phone or a tablet or a computer, the truth still can't get its pants on. Problem is that in our digital age, it's even tougher because you can now arrange all of those ones and zeros in such a manner that they tell you exactly what you want to hear. And now there are media outlets, I refuse to call them newsrooms, they are media outlets and influencers, gosh, I love that word, that have sprung into prominence for their very support of things that aren't true. And now, as you all know, traditional media has taken a real whipping over the last decade or so. But traditional media, think about it for a second, with our chains of command, our editors, our fact checkers, our standards and practices, our libel attorneys who are reviewing our work. We have all of that in place. But today we have a fair number of people who will tell you that the New York Times is full of lies, but everything they've read on bobsbigidea.com is the gospel truth. It gets even tougher because now we have artificial intelligence, which has been thrown into the mix, and it is clearly a work in progress. Recently, I turned to Claude for some help with scheduling a memorial service. My parents are going to be interred at Arlington National Cemetery on August 31st. And Claude told me that that was a Sunday and suggested some Sunday plans. Here's some other things you can do in Washington. I had to tell Claude, August 31st is a Monday. And Claude basically said, you know what, you're right. But moving on, my wife and I have actually decided that artificial intelligence is very much a male rather than a female. Because a woman would say, you know what, I think it's a Sunday, you'll want to check that. But the male AI says, oh yeah, I'm right. Oh, never mind, we'll just move on to what's next. I don't think Claude ever sits bolt upright in bed at 2 a.m. in the morning. So what can you do? Well, if nothing else, I am begging you, I beg everyone to diversify your information diet. If you are only eating out of the same ice cream carton every single day, it may taste really good, but you are missing some really important nutrition in your information intake. I always said this when I was anchoring at Channel 4, I don't want to be your all and everything. That's not healthy. Round it out. Everybody should be taking a little bit of the food pyramid in a news dietary way. Spend a little less time with opinion and more on straight reportage. It is still surprisingly easy to find. One thing that I really wish that the print world would do a little bit better is to delineate between opinion and reportage, because it's all there, but maybe opinion should all be in a green font or something. I don't know. But it's too easy to jumble it up, especially in this digital age. But one more chestnut about the truth. The truth will set you free. Jesus said that. Many years later, it was amended to, the truth will set you free, but first, it will make you miserable. If the truth is not making you miserable every once in a while, I'm not sure you're getting the truth, but we can handle it. Thank you.
The world's moving at warp speed. New tech, new industries, new rules. And right in the middle, Michigan. The future is ours to define, but first, we need to know where we stand. In the last 25 years, Michigan's income growth ranks 50th in the nation. In 2000, Michigan ranked 16th in household income. Now, we're 36th. And today, Michigan ranks 44th in fourth grade reading scores. So much is at stake. In today's economy, ideas matter, but execution wins. It's time for a new trajectory. With clear goals, focused leadership, reforms that stick, and partnerships that unite, bold moves will get us there. Transforming education as Michigan's defining mission. Making Michigan the easiest state to build and grow, and activating Michigan's full economic potential. This isn't about press releases and talking points. It's about what's possible. Because it's one thing to keep chasing the future. In this new era, we intend to lead it.
The next session is a conversation with Mike Duggan. Please welcome the former mayor of the city of Detroit, Mike Duggan, and welcome back to the stage, Sandy Barua.
Mike, it feels like we were just here a year ago.
Yeah. Glad people showed up again.
What the hell happened, man? I mean, riding high in February, shot down in May.
So let me start by saying thank you, Sandy, and to the chamber, and for so many people in this room that supported me. And I'm glad I get a chance to come and talk to you, because my whole life has been about facing reality as it is and not as you wish it to be. And so I started off in December of 24, and I looked at pretty much all the numbers that you showed here, that this state had been declining for decades as the Republicans and Democrats switched back and forth. And I really reached the conclusion the only way to break the cycle was to get outside the parties. And I had no idea how it would work, and I started. And everybody I started with, I said, look, I'm going to go as long as I can, as long as I'm winning, and see if you come along with me. And it was a remarkable 18 months. I was probably doing 6-8 town halls a week in every corner of this state. It started out at 15%, and they said, what's this independent thing? And then people started to get it. And it climbed to 19, and I was up here last year at 21, 26, and you could feel the crowds growing, the people being excited. And last February, your poll showed that I had pulled that even at 30%. And the most important part of that poll was that it showed that more than 60% of Democrats and more than 60% of Republicans were open for voting for an independent. And you could feel it in this state that the people of this state feel like the fighting in Lansing has left them behind. And I was gaining, and the lane was wide open. And if I had been sitting here in March, I'd have told you, I'm on track to win this thing, and it's not even going to be close. And then the national winds changed dramatically. Trump goes into Iran, gas prices start to soar, and my town halls change from I'm the farmer who's been forgotten by Lansing, the young person who can't find affordable housing mission. It turned to, with all the threat we're under from Washington, how do you know you're not going to split the vote and turn it over to Republicans? And you could feel the tone change. And in April, we did a poll, and I was down 5 points. For 15 months, I had gained every single poll, and I was down 5. And then your poll came out in May, and I was down 11. I listened to people say, this poll's fake, that poll's fake. The truth of the matter was, your polling that said I was at 30% in February is accurate, and the polling that said I was down 11 in May was accurate. But that wasn't the thing that really concerned me. The thing that concerned me is that the polling that showed 60% of Democrats and Republicans were open to voting for me in February, our polling was showing 65% of Democrats were afraid to vote for me because they were afraid of tipping the election to Republicans. That the $5 a gallon gas, the Iran war, has caused, you can talk to your friends and neighbors, has caused an anger against the Trump and the Republicans. And you can say the house is on fire in Michigan, but in Michigan it's a slow burn. What has happened in this country, at least in the Democratic attitudes, is there is a depth of anger that has displaced everything else. And so our polling was showing my favorabilities hadn't gone down at all. But what had happened is people who were voting for me were shifting Democrat. And so we look at that, and I said, okay, I'm down 11 points in May. That by itself wasn't terribly troubling. But when 65% of Democrats say they're afraid to vote for me because I'm going to tip it, now that lane is really narrow. And then there was the flip piece, which is the people of this state have been enormous in their financial support. I outraised all of the candidates last year, but 94% of my donations came from the state of Michigan. A majority of my chief opponents came out of state. There is very deep pockets in national money for Republicans and Democrats, tens of millions of dollars. And there's a reason for it. Because I'm not telling you that the California Democrats are that concerned about whether our 8-year-olds read. They are very concerned about the 28 presidential. and with only a handful of states in play, huge amounts of money is going to pour in here to make sure it's either a Republican or a Democratic governor. And so I started out thinking there's got to be a national fundraising base to offset this. And I spent time in California, New York, LA. You hear all this stuff about no labels and the like. The fact is, there is no national fundraising base that says, I want an independent governor in Michigan. There's just not. And I spent a lot of time with everybody. And so here is the reality I'm facing in the last week or so, where I looked at this and I said, okay, the path has narrowed significantly. I've got to go back to my Michigan donors and say no national money is coming. The only way I overcome these odds is Michigan donors doubling what they've already done. And the question I had to ask is this. When the folks here and the folks across the state looked me in the eye and said, okay, Mike, if we double what we've done, do you feel confident on a path to victory? And the truth was, in good conscience, I couldn't say that. Do I really think that the partisan climate between Trump and the Democrats is going to get less partisan as we get closer to November? And so when you spend a year and a half of your life, day and night, working hard for something, and the time I was spending in farmhouses and the outstate folks coming my way, thinking there was a chance, it was a really hard thing. But at some point I just had to say, was I going to come to this conference and tell you all, double down on what you're doing, don't worry, I got a clear path to win when I don't mind? I didn't feel that, and so I just couldn't do it. And so I'm sorry for the people here who are disappointed, but I would say I would have disappointed you far more if I had gone for another 5 months knowing there's not a path and continuing to come back to you and say, we've got to fund it. So I face reality as it is. It was a really hard thing to do, but I did want to come up here and be able to talk to you directly about why I did it and just say thank you for so many people here. You had people in this room supported me when I was here in the early 90s on the Smart Millage, people here in the late 90s when I was repairing the Detroit Public Schools. The number of times at this conference the Chamber has supported what I've done, I'm enormously grateful for all of it. Thank you. Okay. Okay, I promised myself I wasn't going to get emotional, but you're making it really hard. So thank you.
I told Mike as we were walking out here, he said, I know they're going to stand for you. And they did, it just was a little delayed. So obviously you made a lot of calls before that 11 a.m. press conference. I don't want to say pleased, but I was glad I was on that call list. But boy, that was a shocker. That, oh my goodness, you've decided to drop out. Any thought to staying in just a little bit longer? Obviously, polls fluctuate and, political winds shift, especially these days. No thought at all of giving it another month?
Yeah.
Or did you ever think about making your announcement here? I mean, come on, give me the win.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. No, you obviously needed to do it back home.
Sandy, your old pollster agrees with my assessment that I don't have a path. No.
Richard was my call after you called me.
And he didn't call me up and say, hey, Mike, you're misreading this. In fact, we phoned pollsters all over the country, and they said they're seeing the same thing everywhere. Democrats are surging at all levels of offices everywhere in the country. This was not some oddity or some blip. And so, no, and then people calling me up saying, well, you could have run as a Democrat. And I thought, it's a hard thing to explain the way I looked at this. Never for 1 second did I think about that. In my life, my goal was not to be governor. My goal has been to try to do things that are going to outlive me. And in 2003, when the Detroit Medical Center Board voted to close Receiving Hospital, close Hutzel Hospital, close the Carmanis Cancer Hospital, hire a bankruptcy lawyer, and then called me and said, hey, do you want a job? I took that job not to patch things up or to close hospitals, but to build something. And I'm really proud of the fact that 22 years later, all of those hospitals are still open and operating. They're working differently, but those hospitals are there. And when I went into the city of Detroit, and a bunch of you signed up when I wasn't on the ballot as a write-in candidate for mayor, and people didn't think a guy looked like me could get elected, I didn't say to the people of Detroit, your problem is your street lights are out or that the ambulances aren't showing up for an hour. I said, the problem is the us versus them politics. The real problem with the city is black versus white, city versus suburbs, Detroit versus Lansing, and I want to change the politics. And I can't tell you how pleased I was last year to see my successor, Mary Sheffield, running a campaign, no us versus them. Everything was about unity, no black versus white. She says, I'm going to build on what Mike did, and I'm going to take it further with her own ideas and her own initiatives. Detroit is going to continue on a good trajectory. It's going to outlive me, and it's what I was trying to do. And then my decision on this was, you could have been in my analysis. You think about the three last governors of this state, Jennifer Granholm, Rick Snyder, Gretchen Whitmer. Three of the smartest people I have ever met, dedicated public servants who wanted nothing more than to help this state. And the sum total of their 24 years is what you saw, 16th to 44th in third grade rating, 19th to 40th in per capita income, 49th in population growth. And I look at this and I say, is the problem that they weren't good enough? Or is there a problem with the system? And it really is what I call, right, it's the purple state syndrome. It really is that every 2 to 4 years, we're switching back and forth from Republicans to Democrats, and we undo the initiatives of the last one. There is no common purpose. But when you think about third grade reading, we know what the methods are. And they're teaching phonics, and they're small class sizes, and they're tutoring. When it comes to affordable housing, which is in bad shape, our young people are moving out, we know what the formulas are. We built 6,000 in Detroit. When it comes to jobs, we're watching Ohio and Indiana eat our lunch right now. We know what the strategies are, but every 2 years we change direction. And I thought, could it be that you could have a Republican and Democratic Party that could disagree on a lot of things, but we could have a common Michigan strategy on K-12 education, on affordable housing, and on bringing the jobs of the future. And I really thought there was potential to do that. But, and I thought it had to be done from outside the parties. And I stayed with it every second I could, but I blundered. I ran as an independent because I didn't know it was going to be harder to win as an independent than a Democrat. I said, yeah, right. I ran as an independent because I thought it was the only way to change this 24-year trajectory. And now it's going to probably take people from outside of government, kind of thing you're doing here today, to get the two parties to work together better than they are.
So I'll make a quick comment before my next question. You talked about the polling and how the polling changed. One of the Democratic operatives in our February poll, which showed Mike tied at 30, the three top candidates were 30, 30, 30. We were called by this Democratic operative part of Mike Duggan's MAGA donor base, and that the poll could not be trusted because we had endorsed Mike Duggan. This last poll, which played a big part in your decision, same pollster, same methodology, same thing. It's like, yeah, that poll seems right.
Yeah.
I mean, and that is the kind of cynicism and that's kind of comment or just political crassness that just makes people cynical. And frankly, there's a reason why. So anyway, I just wanted to make that comment because it really kind of encapsulates, the political dysfunction that we have here. So I want to stick on this theme of running as an independent. So my theory, having spent a lot of time in politics myself, is that when you ask Americans, you ask Michiganians, would you support an independent? That number just keeps growing, and our polling continues to show that. But why is it that independents don't succeed? Well, my theory is that, well, people in theory want to vote for an independent, but one problem is that there's not a name in the frame. It's like, okay, an independent seems good in concept, but then you put a name in the frame, and one of two things happens. People say, oh, I know who he or she is. He or she's a nut job, not voting for him or her, or never heard of him or her. I'm not voting for someone I've never heard of before. You didn't fall into any of those categories, but yet you still couldn't finish the campaign. What is the trajectory, or is there a trajectory, for independents to be a political force in this country that gets us out of this radical swings that we are in, where we swing from left to right, left to right?
It'll happen when you guys don't have to have a presentation saying the house is on fire, right? I mean, think about that. And I saw it every day. You're polling that people think it's average, and we looked at these numbers on the per capita income. And over the last 10 years, if Michigan had just changed at the rate of the rest of America, the average Michigan family in the last 10 years, you'd have 70,000 more in your bank account today. I mean, that's just how far we've slipped recently. Now, 20 years from now, it's going to be 150,000 more in your bank account today. People aren't feeling it yet because it's so gradual. And I think the change will come when they do. But I actually had a different strategy because I understood that. I'm doing these town halls. I know that people don't see it as a crisis. You ask them about their schools. And yeah, I'm not really happy with my schools, but they don't think they're 44th in America. They just don't believe it. But I tried something different. I sat down with every core constituency group out of the Republican and Democratic Party. I sat with the farmers. I sat with the business leaders. I sat with the League of Conservation Voters and the MEA, the heart of the Democratic groups. I sat with AFSCME, and these are the leaders who actually know what's going on. And you want to talk about hard conversations. The people that are core to the Democratic Republican Party, I said, you know what? Why don't you? It's not working for you. They all know it's not working for them. This changing every 2 years, and every 2 years being the most important election in history. And I'll just give you an example. I hope they won't mind me talking about it. I spent dozens of hours with the League of Conservation Voters and their board members. And I said, look at my track record. We're building solar fields in Detroit to power all of our buildings. I took down the Detroit incinerator. If you objectively look at my track record, you should like what I'm doing, even though you're core to the Democratic Party. And then I'm spending tons of time with farmers. And for some reason, the farmers' personalities and mine bonded, and they were feeling neglected by Lansing, and they were starting to bond with the guy who was the mayor of the city that had been neglected for a long time. But you look at the two of them, and they fight each other in Lansing all the time. The League of Conservation Voters has issues with waste runoff, with fertilizer runoff, with algae, with the watershed. And the farmers are furious. They are being pressured on so many sides, and to see rules changing on them, they can't survive. And so they're clashing to basically a dead standoff in Lansing on issue after issue. I'm sitting in the room with these folks. You sit with the people of the League of Conservation Voters, nobody cares more deeply about the stewardship of land and water than they do. Then you sit with farmers who have been on that land for 4 generations, their family has cared for it. Nobody cares about stewardship of that land and their watershed more than they do. And I listen. There is a 70% overlap in what they want. And I said to both of them, how about you both endorse me? Put your staff in my campaign office. We'll hammer out the 30% you don't disagree on. Can you imagine what a powerful force for good it would be if you had the Republican farming community and the Democratic League of Conservation Voters working and changing this for the long run? And they listened to me. They didn't endorse anybody else. They were listening. I don't know if I would have gotten them there or not, but I can tell you this. The more I listened, the more I thought, we have more in common than we thought. But of course, it's in the Democrats' interest to tell them they're 100% with them and raise money against the Republicans. And it's the Republicans' interest to tell the farmers they're 100% with them and fire them up against each other and raise money against each other. And I'm saying, who is saying, forget the 30% you disagree on? Build on the 70% you do. And it's happening today with Chandra Metaferi, one of the great leaders the MEA's had, and the business leaders of Michigan. The #1 state in America on test scores is Massachusetts. And it's because in the 1990s, the business leaders in Massachusetts convinced Republicans and Democrats to adopt a plan where they doubled the funding of Massachusetts schools over 7 years with real accountability. 30 years later, Massachusetts, year in and year out, leads this country in achievement. And think about the wealth that's been gained in Massachusetts. And I'm thinking, could we see the day when the MEA and the business leaders of Michigan actually hammer out something and bring the politicians along? I hope that there will be people out there without me in the race who say, okay, maybe it won't come from the politicians. Maybe we ought to leave the politicians out of the equation and go sit down with the groups that seem like they're on the other side, because I'm telling you, you have a lot more in common than you think.
So a handful of business organizations jumped out with early endorsements of the Duggan campaign, including us, our friends at the Lansing Chamber. You had scores of endorsements from traditional Democrat-leaning union groups. I know almost for certain that you had more business support waiting in the wings. What's your sense of, had you been able to continue the campaign, if it made sense, would you have continued to get these kind of left-leaning, right-leaning endorsements as the campaign went on?
You know, there's two different groups, and there were a lot of very large business organizations who I had long conversations with, who said, we'll be with you, just not yet. Let's wait till filing deadline, let's wait till after the primary is over. And you can't blame them. They're like, okay, if Mike could actually do this, it would change the state. But if I get all the way out there and the independent crashes and burn, I burn my bridges either with the Republican Party or
tell
the
me
Democratic
about it.
Party. Right. You know how it was, right? And I had people look me in the eye and say, we've decided to endorse you, but just not yet. The interesting was, the ones who didn't hesitate were the unions. This was the damnedest thing. I had more than 30 unions endorse me. And these guys, they had the immediate concerns of their members. And so the carpenters and the plumbers and the bricklayers are like, you know what? I don't care if the Democrats are mad at me right now. There's $10 billion a building in Detroit where nothing was going on, and Mike has gotten us jobs, I'm with you. The firefighters and the police officers, the same thing. The bus drivers, who said, I don't care if I piss off the Democrats right now. Mike has delivered, and if he's the governor, my members are going to have more jobs. And it was so interesting to watch the dynamics as one after another these Democratic unions endorsed, took enormous grief from Democratic legislators, frankly, who called and threatened him, as well as the party chair, but who made an immediate decision that it was in the best interest of their members. But these unions aren't in position to offset a $40 or $50 million National Democratic Governors Association, Republican Governors Association fund. They just weren't. And that was the reality. And so I will always be grateful. We had a day in August where we did an announcement. We had 1,000 people at the train station. 200 elected officials stood up and endorsed me, about 100 on the Republican side, 100 on the Democratic side. The grief they took, the Democratic Party immediately shut off voter lists to the Democratic officials who endorsed me. And they said, you know what? My city is going to be better off if Mike's the governor. I'll take the heat. And this was the hardest part of my decision, as I was calling all those people as I did to you, and say if there was any path at all, I'd fight this to the bitter end. But we hit a point where, you know, once I got 11 points down, All those folks who said, Mike, we'll get back to you after filing deadline, or we'll get back to you after the primary, that's what they were saying to me when I was even. When I was 11 points down, you could just see it wasn't going to happen, and I couldn't blame them there. Am I going to sever my 20, 30-year relationship with the party when you're 11 points behind and slipping? You could see what was going to happen.
So 2026 is still going to be a hugely important election in this state. We're going to be the center of America's political universe. We're not going to be able to watch television for 6 months.
Right.
What is your advice to the next governor? What can you share with him or her based on what you learned as being Detroit's mayor, being a business CEO, your other governmental positions? What would you say to him or her when they call you? Because they will.
So I'm having conversations already, and I've had long talks with several of the candidates for governor from both parties. I've heard from Senate candidates, congressional candidates, a whole bunch of state rep and state Senate candidates, and they're all asking me the same thing. I mean, they were watching the size of the crowds I was getting, people who were so angry at both parties. And they're trying to figure out right now, what do I do? And I'm saying to every one of them, you have to decide for yourself, is your biggest goal in life to win that office, or is your biggest goal in life to accomplish something? It will be relatively easy for the Democrats to sweep in this state this year and across the country by just attacking Trump, attacking the Democrats. If your goal is the office, that's the shortest way. And of course, we live that in 2020 nationally. Joe Biden became president, got a Democratic House, a Democratic U.S. Senate, right? Fueled almost entirely at anger at Trump and the Republicans. 4 years later, you had a Republican sweep. You had a Republican president, a Republican House, a Republican Senate. If you do not run on what you're going to accomplish, and if you don't have a plan to build on it across the aisles, the Democrats are going to sweep in 26, and the Republicans are going to sweep them back out in 30. It's what's going to happen. It's what's been happening in this state over and over. Think about Gretchen Whitmer. In the last 8 years in this state, we had, 8 years ago, Rick Snyder and a Republican trifecta. Then we had Gretchen Whitmer and a Republican House and Senate. Then in 22, a Democratic trifecta. And today, a Democratic governor, a Democratic Senate, and a Republican House. You've had 4 different configurations in this state in the last 8 years. Now, you tell me, have we done anything on our economic development strategy? If this state's got an economic development strategy, I got no damn idea what it is. Okay? We've gone from mega credits to gardening to transformational brownfield, which I helped pass, which was the Detroit model, discount people on taxes as they build but don't give them money up front, to SOAR, where we gave away $250 million cash grants, to now you've got not only is SOAR canceled, transformational brownfields are canceled. You got people talking about canceling MEDC. Do you have any idea what Indiana and Ohio are doing here right now in the middle of this chaos? Every single national company is told if you go to Michigan, you're in a state that changes policy and direction every 2 years. And the other day, I think I hit rock bottom. I'm at the BP, I'm pumping $5 gallon gas into my car. I'm as mad as can be, and the little guy comes on the TV screen where they got the ads. And he says, Ohio is the second cheapest state in America at affordable housing. 25-year-old kid, move here and start your life. And I thought, these jobs, Ohio, which as Bob mentioned before, they've got a 20-year strategy where they took the liquor business, and John Kasich, a governor who was a bipartisan governor while he was a Republican, laid out a plan that outlasted him that is fueling their growth. And I'm saying to the Republicans and Democrats, you have a choice. The strategy that helps you win or the strategy to change the direction of the state. And I am hoping you see candidates emerge this year who take a look at what happened with my campaign and say, you know what? I'm going to reach out to a strategy. I'm going to run on what I'm going to do. And I'm going to run on involving both sides, right? And their success is going to depend on you crossing the aisles and backing the people who are running that way. and are doing those things. Because at the end of the day, I do think the pressure is going to have to come from outside Lansing. Lansing's not going to reform itself, and I think what you are doing here with this theme is a great start. So thank you all very much for what you've done.
Well, I want to say that, you know, the if only question is rattling around in a lot of people's minds, if you had been able to raise the money, because I do know that anytime you got in a room, you owned the room. Everyone who was in that room, I don't care if it was in northern Michigan, East Michigan, West Michigan, you left with everyone in that room as a Duggan supporter. So, Mike, you are always welcome on this stage. And on behalf of all of us, thank you.
Thank you all very much. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it, man. Thank you, Governor.
Distinguished guests, this concludes theater programming. Please make your way to
And that will do it for day one coverage of the 2026 Mackinac Policy Conference. We start again tomorrow morning at 8:30. On the agenda tomorrow, the 48th Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, delivers his keynote address. Former U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg sits down with President and CEO of the Detroit Regional Chamber, Sandy Barua, a discussion on Michigan's data center development, and a session focused on how leaders are working together to improve the education system here in Michigan. You can watch today's sessions and more on demand at onedetroitpbs.org or subscribe to the One Detroit channel on YouTube. For all of us at Detroit PBS, have a great evening, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
Across our Masco family of companies, our goal is to deliver better living possibilities and make positive changes in the neighborhoods where we live, work, and do business. Masco, a Michigan company since 1929.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit PBS. Through our giving, we are committed to meeting the needs of the communities we serve statewide to help ensure a bright and thriving future for all. Learn more at dtefoundation.com.
You know the feeling, the drive to discover, to excel. At Kettering, you'll test your ideas right away. You'll push them, break them, and rebuild them to solve what's next. Not everyone has your grit and vision, but Kettering isn't for everyone. It's for you.